Notre Dame fans, welcome back to another edition of our Friday free-for-all mailbag. We are going to talk about all things Notre Dame related. And today I'm actually joined by my guy, Sean Davis, who is a producer at ESPN Chicago. Sean has blessed us with his presence today on the show, and we're going to enjoy that with Sean today. So Sean, I got some weird noise coming here from my phone. I'm not sure where it's coming from, but let's get that going. And sorry, I don't know where that's Sean. Give me 1 second. My phone. I'm not sure where it's coming from, but let's get that going. Hang on a second. Sorry. I don't know where that's showing. It's my other computer for some reason is playing the show. So I'm like talking and it's like this delay and I'm like, what the heck is going on? There's some weird thing going on. So my apologies to everyone, but Sean is joining us. So Sean, thank you so much for being with us today, buddy.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's been a long time coming. I'm glad I can hop on with you today.
Yeah, well, you've had me on your show before, so I was like, you know what? We got to get you on the show one of these days, and the schedule has just never quite worked out how I had wanted it to, but now today we get to happen. So Sean and I are going to answer all of your questions. We're going to dive into a whole bunch of different topics today. But there was a couple topics that I wanted to get to. So for some reason on YouTube, there's some questions that are showing up, Sean, that aren't showing up in our chat, so we're not going to be able to pull them up. But I wanted to get to some of these first before we begin, because I think there's some interesting ones. And the first one is from Domer Grizz, and his question is: people are saying Cincinnati will be a tough game, but much of their success was due to Marcus Freeman. Who took over for him, and do you expect their defense to take a step back this year? So, Sean, I'm going to let you kick off, beginning by talking about that, because I have a unique take on this, but I'm very curious to kind of what your opinion is on this subject.
Well, I think we've seen Notre Dame being able to transition and the system being in place defensively, going from coordinators leaving and the next coordinator coming in. We saw that with Clark Lee and the way he was able to continue that defense, continue the growth of the defense. He tweaked it to his liking, the system just a little bit, but they pretty much were nationally ranked, I would probably say, in the same ballpark for about a 2 to 3 year range there. Cincinnati, I believe, those are players that, were recruited by their defensive coordinator that is now the defensive coordinator, Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame. So they're going to come into that game with a chip on their shoulder. That's number one. Number two, they know the system. I think they're going to be able to play it very well. I just don't know if they have the talent to go 4 quarters with Notre Dame up front. Yep. And that's going to go to, I'm sure we'll talk about the offensive line, but a lot hinges on the Notre Dame offensive line and its cohesion as it goes throughout the season. That stretch right there where they play Wisconsin and then on to Cincinnati, and I forget who they play right after that. But
Virginia Tech and
then USC, if I'm not mistaken.
That after a bye week, yep.
Yeah, that 4-game stretch is pretty much, in my opinion, the core of the season. Like, I know we play Florida State to open up, but that stretch right there is going to prove a lot when it comes to Notre Dame. But I do believe starting that stretch, that Cincinnati game was probably going to be a little tougher than most Notre Dame fans would like. I don't think Cincinnati wins, but I think it will be a tough game and very close for about 2.5 to 3 quarters.
And look, the reality is Marcus Freeman's DNA on that defense isn't gone just because he's gone. I mean, and that kind of is to your point is, Notre Dame, Clark Lee did a good job at Notre Dame, but it's not like he was replacing Brian Van Gorder. That was what Mike Elko had to do, right? He had already laid a foundation that Clark was able to build upon and did a great job. And then Marcus Freeman will do the same thing with what the foundation that Clark Lee built upon that Mike Elko started. And the other thing that we have to remember is Luke Fickell is a defensive coach. I mean, that's his forte. He was the defensive coordinator or co-defensive coordinator at Ohio State for a long time. He hired Mike Tressel to replace him. Mike Tressel was a defensive coordinator and a co-coordinator at Michigan State for a while under Mark D'Antonio. So there's going to be a lot of familiarity with what Luke Fickell wants to do. And I'm not trying to say that Marcus Freeman wasn't the driver of that defense, but Luke Fickell, it's kind of like when you lose Kirby Smart at Alabama. Yeah, Kirby Smart did a great job, but Nick Saban's really, at the end of the day, is going to have a huge impact on what that looks like, right? And so I think that they're going to be okay on defense, at least early on. Now, the recruiting thing is the one that I'm going to be curious about, but that's more of a long-term thing, not so much going to impact it. Plus, Cincinnati loses almost nobody from their defense last year, and that's the other thing. So where you'd really be in trouble if you were Cincinnati is if you were in a situation where you lost Marcus Freeman and like 5 or 6 starters. I mean, Sanders is back, Ahmad Gardner's back, and those two guys right there alone are considered 2 of the best players in the country at their position, And so the issue for me for Cincinnati is going to more so be the offense. I don't think their offense has the same level of talent that their defense does. And I think Desmond Ridder is a very talented quarterback physically, but there's still a lot in his game that needs to continue to improve. And we saw some of those issues a little bit last year against Georgia. And their offensive line, to me, isn't on the same level as their defensive line. I mean, the talent level they have on defense, to me, is significantly better. They have Power 5 talent on defense. I don't think they have as much of that on the offensive side of the ball. And so that's the thing for me that I say. But I do think, to your point, Sean, I do think it's going to be a tough game. I do. Now, Notre Dame's at home, and as we know, Notre Dame hasn't lost a home game since, mid-September, early September of 2017.
Yeah,
they're going to get tested at home this year because, you talked about the 4-game stretch on. I'd even expand it to 5 because North Carolina is right after USC.
Yep.
And I always forget, are they right back and forth? I know that they play them both late, but yeah, I just looked up the schedule. They're back to back. So I mean, that 5-game stretch is going to determine their season. If you get through that 5-game stretch undefeated, you've got Navy, Virginia, Georgia Tech, and Stanford. So that's like you said, that's going to determine whether or not Notre Dame is a really good top 10 to 15 team, or if Notre Dame's a playoff contender again. That it's going to be determined during that stretch. Absolutely.
Now we look at identity of teams, right? So you talk about Luke Fickell, and you talk about him staying within the family, that Ohio State family, with going from Freeman to Tressel. But you talked about not trusting the offense not being as talented. Very much like a Tressel team. When he was there at Ohio State, where their quarterbacks were okay, they didn't make the mistakes. They ran the ball. They played solid on offense, and they depended on their defense. I think that's the same type of Cincinnati team that's going to be walking into South Bend. And if Notre Dame can play solid football, I believe their talent will rise to the top, and ultimately they'll end up winning by double digits in that game. And it goes now. Everything you've talked about with the changes that may be coming on the Notre Dame offense, at the end of the day, the identity of Notre Dame is who Brian Kelly wants to be, right? Brian Kelly wants to run the ball, and he wants to play to his offensive line, and he wants to play to his defense. So I'm going to step out on a limb early and say a defensive struggle for about 2 quarters. I really believe that. Yeah,
and I think that line matchup, because Cincinnati has one of the few defensive lines. See, there's very few good defensive teams on the schedule this year.
Yeah,
the Wisconsin-Cincinnati back-to-back is arguably the 2 best defenses they're going to play all year, and it comes somewhat early. And so that is when you're going to see the offensive line, in my opinion, have some struggles. I think you're going to see Majai Sanders and some of the different coverages they're going to do. Now, what I'm curious about, and we're not going to know this till we get to the season, is what I think the Marcus Freeman DNA relative to Luke Fickell is Luke Fickell at Cincinnati had very much the same philosophy that they had on offense, which is, at Ohio State defensively, which is our dudes are better than your dudes. And so we're going to be pretty basic, and we're just going to line up and we're just going to be better than you. I think Marcus Freeman is the one who brought some of the nuance and some of the diversity of alignment and schemes and calls, and brought some of that aggressiveness. I'm curious if that's going to continue. That's something that I'm going to be interested in seeing now that you do have sort of that Ohio State DNA written all over that defense now with Mike Tressel coming in. And obviously he was with Mark D'Antonio for a while, who was with Jim Tressel as his defensive coordinator back when they won their national title. What was it? 2002, right?
Yep.
And so that's kind of where I'm at there. And then this next question, we're going to stick with the Marcus Freeman conversation, Sean, and I'm going to pose this to you. This is also from Domer Grizz. What makes you confident that Marcus Freeman could have success taking over for Brian Kelly as opposed to Bob Davie taking over for Lou Holtz? I always hear the Notre Dame job requires actual head coaching experience. So, Sean, let me get your thoughts on that one.
Wow, that's a great question. First, I'll start with this. I've had the ability and the pleasure to work with a lot of people that actually played in the NFL. When the hire was made by Notre Dame, I talked to multiple people, multiple ex-NFL players, and their words about Marcus Freeman was superstar. Mm-hmm. Superstar, flat out. Notre Dame did the right thing, stepping up and taking him out of the hands of LSU. So with that being said, I can only go on that and talk about what other people that know the game and how they speak of him. Mm-hmm. And say that I don't know if Bob Davie was spoken of in the same light.
He was not. You're being nice. I'll just say it. He was not. He did not have the same level of respect.
So that's number one. That gives me a little bit more confidence that he'll be a very good successor to one Brian Kelly if Notre Dame makes that decision to allow him to be the successor. Number two, if you watch, I think you guys were talking about most talented teams in Brian Kelly era last week. I've been watching games in that '93 season, which is probably the most frustrating season for me as a Notre Dame fan. And in that '93 season, that freshman class that had Mark Edwards and I believe Randy Kinder and all of those great running backs he had talented wide receivers to go with Derek Mays and the other great guys, but he didn't have the quarterback to really engineer that team, the talent that he had. And I think there was a transition from the roster standpoint that when Lou was coming to the end of his reign, the game was evolving as well. Mm-hmm. So that was a trick bag. I don't think that's something that Notre Dame's going to have to deal with now. And if they have to deal with it, they have a guy who's on the cutting edge of the game and the way he approaches the game. So that gives them an upper hand. Yeah. Once again, I wasn't around ex-NFL players and people in the game back when Bob Davie was making a transition, but I don't know if he was on the cutting edge the way he looked at the game of football, like Marcus Freeman is. So those are two things that I think, him being on the cutting edge, as you said before, he brought the diversity to that Cincinnati defense. I think he brings the same thing to the program. I think he brings that great recruiter that you need your head coach to be. I think he steps into the realm and he battles with the Nick Sabans, 4 5-star and 4-star recruits. I think there are a lot of advantages to Marcus Freeman being the successor in comparison to what Bob Davie brought to the table. That's just the way I look at it.
I'm a big proponent of a head coach of a place like Notre Dame, Ohio State, Alabama, places like that need to hire guys with head coaching experience. That is my normal go-to. But I also think you have to be open-minded enough to say that when there is to your point, a superstar or a coordinator that is head and shoulders above fitting what you are looking for, then you have to be open-minded to that. And that is where I think it's different. Bob Davie was not that. Bob Davie, here's the other thing too. If Marcus Freeman replaces Brian Kelly, it's because Notre Dame is still winning. The mistake that Notre Dame made when they replaced Lou Holtz with Bob Davie was the program was on a descent in a lot of ways. The recruiting wasn't the same. Lou was, the criticism I've heard about Lou Holtz from people that covered the team back then and were a little older and, could follow it more than, you and I, who were probably high school kids, right, during that era, was he just wasn't as there were more things pulling him away from football than there was from 88 to 93 when it was his primary focus was we're going out there to win championships. It was the speaking. It was the other types of things. His health was starting to decline later in his tenure. I think the program had kind of gone through some really rough patches with, some scandal type of situation. There was a lot of stuff going on, and then you put in a guy that, in my opinion, wasn't qualified, and so the whole, Bob Davie failed, so you don't hire a guy with head coaching experience. That was a Bob Davie problem. And not every defensive coordinator, in my opinion, is Bob Davie. And I've made this point before. One thing I do know about Bob Davie was there were a lot of people in the game that viewed his success as the defensive coordinator at Texas A&M as more about R.C. Slocum than it was about him. Because remember, R.C. Slocum was a defensive coordinator when Texas A&M was really growing and building, and then he took over as head coach. So that still had very much had his DNA on it. And so I think that I would always say hire a guy with head coaching experience, but you always have to be open-minded enough. Now, the other part of it is I do want to see Marcus Freeman coach at Notre Dame first. But what we know of him today, I'm very optimistic that by the end of his first season, we're going to be like, yeah, okay. Yeah, this guy's legit. And here's the other part of it. Recruiting in today's era is so important for a head coach. And especially at a place like Notre Dame, to your point, to where a guy that's going to battle the Sabins, the Sweeneys, the Ryan Days, the Lincoln Rileys. We've already seen Marcus Freeman's imprint in recruiting. I mean, you look at Tyson Ford, Aiden Gabera, the impact he had there. They're going to have, in my opinion, when it's all said and done, the best linebacking class in the country. And not just the best that Notre Dame's had, but find me a better linebacking core this year than Nolan Ziegler, Josh Burnham, and let's just say hypothetically Jalen Sneed and Junior Tuihalamaka. Good luck with that. I mean, he's done a great job, and then he's going to have to back that up on field success is what I'm projecting. So that he's just if we said a lot, but if we could sum it up in one thing, he's a way better coach than Bob Davie was. I mean, there's no way around it. He's just in every single, from, like you said, being innovative, being ahead of the game, being someone who's going to go after big time recruits on the recruiting trail, someone who's got success that's more about him than it necessarily is about, just carrying someone else's water. Because, like I said, Bob Davie, you could say, well, Luke Fickell, yeah, okay. But they took over for a Cincinnati situation where they weren't doing great, and they built it into something great. Bob Davie stepped into a situation at Texas A&M where they were already really good, and it was just like, don't screw it up. Yeah, and so there's no parallels whatsoever between the two, and I don't believe that you should say, well, always hire assistants because look at Urban Meyer and look at Dabo Sweeney is an even better example because he went straight from position coach to being a head coach. But you shouldn't use the anomalies to define the rule, and I think you do that both ways. You do that, number one, with the successes, but you should also do that with the major failures like a Bob Davie. Bob Davie doesn't define every single assistant coach that's being promoted head coach, just like Dabo Sweeney doesn't. So that's kind of where I would come from on that.
It was very much a questionable hire by Notre Dame at the time. I'm sure the story is the inspiration came from the way the A&M defense played against Notre Dame in the bowl game. They're impressed. And then I go back and I watch that bowl game all the time, and I'm saying, look, I don't see it. And then they turned around and played them again with Bob Davie as a defensive coordinator. And I still felt like Texas A&M as a staff out-coached Notre Dame in that bowl game. But Notre Dame just had better players at the end.
Yeah. And again, but you point back to, was that a Bob Davie thing?
That's
or was that
an
an R.C. Slocum thing?
That goes back to your point. R.C. Slocum, one of the most underrated coaches in college football history in my opinion.
Yeah, he did an excellent job. Let's keep rolling along. Oh, and by the way, if you go into the store, into the chat, if you're in the chat now, you'll see this little thing right here. Okay, that is our web address for our new online store, which is now live. We've already made some sales. There's a few that went through as we were stalking, Sean. We were starting the show, so that is live. So if you've been asking about hats and Irish breakdown gear, Sean has a hat that's already been shipped. That's on his way to his place. So the next time he's on the show, hopefully, or the next time I'm on the show with him, he'll be rocking the IB hat. So I'm looking forward to that. But let's keep rolling along, Sean. We got some great questions today, as we always do. AJ says, curious to know if you both follow Notre Dame basketball. Do you believe that the Mike Brey era had run its course, and do you think Notre Dame basketball can reach a higher ceiling?
Mike Brey, and I believe this 100%. Mike Brey is a top 10 basketball coach in college basketball. Top 10. That's how much of a teacher I believe he is, especially a teacher of offense. When it comes to spacing, when it comes to movement, when it comes to passing. I think the talent disparage, I think the talent drop off once his bigs left, and especially once Mooney got away. Durham, they thought he would step up and kind of fill that role that Mooney filled for, 3 to 4 seasons, which was an automatic double-double. dominating the paint, get to the foul line, get Notre Dame into the penalty. The maturation of Hub, I think, is going to come along this season. I think you're going to see a much better player. Very impressed by the transfer that they have coming in. I think he's going to make an immediate impact. I think injuries have hit them hard the last couple of years with key players on the wings. But yet and still, you might not like the record, but Notre Dame stays competitive. They really do. They stay competitive, and they've been in games against big-time teams. So that's encouraging for me because I believe the roster next year is more talented than it has been in the previous 2 years. Mm-hmm. That's my opinion. So I look for Notre Dame to sneak into the top 5 teams in the ACC. I'll go ahead and make that early prediction. I really think they're going to surprise a lot of people. And I think once again, people will begin to look at Mike Brey as one of the great coaches in college basketball, the way they were before the previous 2 to 3 years.
I think the criticism of Coach Brey in regards to his recruiting is somewhat justified. I think there are certainly some legitimate issues, but I also think we're seeing him shake up his staff a little bit too. He just brought Anthony Solomon back, who, when you go back and look at, the staff that built that team that made the back-to-back Elite Eight runs, Anthony Solomon was obviously a key part of that. So I think that's going to help with recruiting. I think that's going to help with guard development as well, because he played a big role in the development of those guards, and that's what carried the team back then. But I think what made that team so good, when you look at those back-to-back Elite Eight teams, is they could play inside out. They could play through their bigs. And I think that Zach August's ability to play at the foul line, both as a passer, as someone who could do back screens and attack the rim, was a very important part to who they were. And I still feel like I would have liked to have seen Notre Dame was playing really well at the end of not this past season, but the season before, when COVID hit and canceled the season. And I would have really liked to have seen how that team could have finished their season. And so now you look at the situation where you say, okay, well, this past season, I think they were just so guard heavy. And with all due respect to Jawan Durham, he is a complementary player.
Yes.
He is not your lead big.
Right.
Now you have Paul Atkinson stepping in, who, in my opinion, has a game is very similar to Zach August, but more skilled, in my opinion. I also think that Matt Zona being a year older, getting Elijah Taylor back from an injury, I think those things are going to help this team compete more down low than they've been able to in recent years. Even with John Mooney, it was kind of like there just were times where they just weren't. And Jawan Durham, as good of a shot blocker as he was, I did not think was a great low post defender. And there's a difference.
Yeah.
And so I think that you're going to see some improvement there. And I think not having to rely on shooting and being hot to be successful is going to help this team, because when this team shot well this year, I mean, they could hang with anybody. We saw it.
Yeah.
But they were so streaky with Atkinson. I think with Zona developing, because I think he can be a nice role player off the bench, with Taylor coming in, who can be, I think, a defensive dynamo, a rebounding guy. I think that, as you talked about, guys being a year older, I think that having that legitimate inside presence, not just where a guy that's going to, maybe hit some buckets here every now and then, but get a lot of stuff off damage, but a guy that you can run your offense through.
Yeah.
Which you can do with Paul Atkinson, is going to be huge and tremendously beneficial, and it's going to take some of the pressure off of the guards. And I think that's going to then make them more effective. So I do think they're poised for a bounce back. I think some of the changes he's made in the coaching staff, they've been minor, but getting Anthony Solomon back with Rod Balanis, and then you've got Ryan Humphrey, I think you've got the makings of getting the staff back to the high level that it was, that allowed them to get there. Because as you know, Sean, head coaches, you need a great head coach, but you have to have great staffs too to develop your whole team. And I really like the Anthony Solomon hire to go with Humphrey and Balanis. So I think that Notre Dame, to your point, I agree with you. I think Notre Dame is going to bounce back this year. What they need to do now is they need to get back on track from a recruiting standpoint, and that's going to be the big thing for me.
And I really hope that Robbie Carmody can stay healthy. That kid has just had a streak of bad luck when it comes to health. And one person that I think is a key to the season that took a major step forward, in my opinion, Nate Laszewski. I think he became more confident as a player. And if that continues and goes into this season, watch out.
And here's the other thing. With Atkinson, there's now a more legitimate down in the post scorer which is going to be beneficial for the spacing offense they like to do in regards to getting Nate some extra looks.
Yeah.
I think the fact that zone is going to be your older and in better conditioning. Here's the other thing that hurt the freshman last year is the offseason was way different for basketball teams too.
Absolutely.
He didn't get the same level of coaching and development that he would have got because of the limitations on being able to spend time with players because we were still dealing with the COVID stuff. And now you get Elijah Taylor back. So now there's some guys you can bang with down low, and you don't have to ask Nate Laszewski to do that, which is going to make him a more effective player. But to your point, I think him having to do that last year was great for him.
Great for him.
Because he realized, hey, I can play like a big guy if I need to.
Yep.
And so I think that is something that's going to certainly help him. And if now you got two legitimate scorers down low, whereas last year you had a legitimate scorer and a shot blocker that could do some damage against, on putbacks and things like that, but always had kind of trouble with some of the better bigs. I think this team is, like you said, Sean, if Robbie Carmody can come back too, that's just another high energy guy coming off the bench. I think this team has a chance to be much better. Now, how much better? I mean, remains to be seen. But I'm confident this team is going to get back, and I think that I'm curious of how it wasn't many, but how the whole booing thing of Mike Brey at the end of the year. Mike Brey's a pretty easygoing dude. I wonder if that's something that maybe lit a little bit of a fire under him, because he's a competitor just like all of us. And don't let his laid back, slick hair, chilling at the places across on Eddy Street fool you. This is a competitive dude. And I wonder if maybe that lit a little bit of fire under him. So
I just wonder, similar to Roy Williams, who I give a lot of credit to for being very honest with himself and understanding that the game had passed him by. Now, he's still a great coach to this day. He can coach the game, but the game evolves, and there's more to it than just coming out on a Thursday night or a Saturday afternoon and coaching for 40 minutes.
Yeah,
when you're running a program,
right?
So I wonder if Mike Brey is in that area where he has to really analyze and self-examine himself to say and ask himself, man, has my time here, is it close to coming to an end, or is the game starting to pass me by, and have like the same conversation that Roy Williams had with himself?
And I'm going to say one last thing, and then we'll get back to football. But I think he also needs a little bit of a John Beilein inner turmoil moment. What I mean by that is, John Beilein had great success at West Virginia and Canisius and all those places, and then early on at Michigan, based on he was an innovative offensive mind. And it wasn't that long ago that John Beilein and Mike Brey were considered the two most innovative coaches in basketball. Well, in the last 4 or 5 years, the game has changed dramatically. And now everybody's playing a more offensive game. Beilein realized that and said, hey, we're not going to get the players that Michigan State's getting and that some of these other teams are getting, although Juwan Howard is proving that Michigan can do that. That was more of a choice by John Beilein than it was like Notre Dame, which isn't going to get those 5-star players. But he went they went from an offensive team that made a Final Four run to a defensive team that made a Final Four run. I don't think Notre Dame needs to become a defensive team like John Beilein does, but I do think they have to defend better, because you're in an era now where so many more teams can score that you're going to have to make some stops. And I think that's another reason where I think the Anthony Solomon hire could be beneficial, is because I think it's going to help them improve a little bit defensively, because, getting 3 or 4 stops a game would have been the difference in Notre Dame winning about 7 or 8 more games last year. And I'm talking just 3 or 4 stops. And I think that's also where being better down low is going to help too, because they're not going to be giving up as many second chance points and things like that. So I think those are areas that are just those little things that are the difference between a team that had a lot of really close losses and late game losses, that it's not like they were just getting out there getting smashed every week.
Not at all. They were
in a lot of games and should have won a lot of games. And I think those stops late in games, and he called his team out, he called himself out. I think Mike Brey realizes that you just can't keep doing what you're doing. And I feel like the last couple of years were sort of his 2016 Brian Kelly moment. Where it's like, you know what, we got to make. I either got to walk away,
that's good,
or we got to make some changes to get this thing going. And I think he chose to step up and say, we're going to make some changes and get back at this thing.
Totally agree.
All right. So let's get back to football. AJ asks, where did you have Justin Brent rank coming out of high school? He was a consensus 4-star and looked physically, athletically impressive, but his offer list was not impressive. I think his offer list was not impressive because most coaches saw what I saw, which was he was a really athletic player, but not much of a football player. And as we saw in college, Justin was not much of a football player. He was just a really athletic kid who had a lot of other interests besides playing football. Because I don't think he just was he didn't have much success going to Nevada because he was a really big athletic kid. But look, and that's why you get you go to some camp, you look great at a camp, you run fast, and everybody loves you. But at the end of the day, what do you do with pads on? And Justin played against pretty poor Indiana competition and still wasn't an incredibly dominant player. So that was my issue with Justin Brent. I just don't think he was that good of a football player. He was really athletic.
They say the tape never lies, right?
Right. Absolutely. Okay. Tommy Leonard, make sure all y'all new people got the thumbs up. Yes, we always welcome growth. Today is our biggest show of the week so far. We're going on a little bit of a downturn, Sean, as we kind of get late May and as people start making their summer plans. It's nice outside, but we're back up today, so I'm excited about that. All right. Jonathan says, just put my order in for the snapback hat and Gap Closers t-shirt. My man. Nice. That's what I'm talking about. And if you're not sure of what he is talking about, let's kind of show that here real quick. I'm going to show you guys. Actually, let me not pull up the one with the back end stuff. Let me pull up this other one and show you what he's talking about for those who have not seen. So as I said, the online store is now up and running. My wife has been working overtime to get that bad boy going. So let's just quickly check that out before we get back at it, Sean. So that is our online store. So Jonathan ordered this snapback hat right here, which we have actually 3 colors of. So you've got that color, you got a little bit of a different navy, and then we got that look right there. Sean, you went with that look. Mm-hmm. Right. And actually, no, you got the trucker hat, right?
Yep.
So you got this. Sean got the trucker hat, and that is what Jonathan said he just got. No, he got the snapback. And then the Gap Closer shirt. So this is our deal. I was on the Mark Rogers show talking about Gap Closers yesterday, so we're spreading the word. Notre Dame has not got to get those Gap Closers. That's what it's all about. So that's the shirt that he's talking about. We have it in different colors, obviously. We have the Gap Closers hoodie and a lot of other gear on here. And then the Gap Closers hoodie comes in 3 different colors. My wife really liked that one. So since she designed the store for me, I say, you want a pink hoodie in there, baby, you can have a pink hoodie in there. And then there's the polos and a lot of different things. So that is our store. So the store is up and running, and the link is in the chat. And I'm going to start including that in all of our shows moving forward. But that's that. So let's get back to football, Sean. So enough of that stuff. Let's get back to talking some football here real quick. So let's get some questions in. Everybody, make sure you're getting your questions in, so that way we can keep rolling here. D-Rock down in Southwest Florida. Rub it in, man. Just rub it in. We're up here in Northwest Indiana. Sean's in Chicago, dealing with this overcast, gray day.
Yeah.
So, all right. Jay asked this question: how many commits in June? Over under 5 commits. So. I'm going to go public commits or private commits. So let's go total commits, so public and private. I'm definitely taking the over. I mean, there's 5 that I'm certain of are going to happen in June. Yeah, I mean, and I'm just talking the 22 class. There's 5 that I'll be shocked if the 5 that are in my head aren't committed by the end of June or maybe middle of June. So I feel really good about 5 players. So I'm definitely taking the over on that one, Sean. So.
You know what? I'm going to go ahead and lean on your expertise and take the over as well. But I'll go ahead and add this, or ask you this, shall I say. Out of those 5, who is the one guy that you absolutely want the most?
Ooh, of the 5 that see, now you're trying to trick me into saying who I think is going to commit. So I'm going to answer it a different way.
Okay.
I think that there is a 1-2 punch that I think Notre Dame has to get, in my opinion. And I really want them to have Jalen Sneed and Junior Tugalamok in the class together by the end of June.
Okay.
I think those 2 guys, to me, because the biggest question mark on the position in recent seasons has been linebacker from a recruiting standpoint.
Right.
You had Prince Kali and Kahanu Kia, and that's been it the last 2 years. And this is a linebacker centric defense.
And it's a great year for linebackers.
Yes, and it's a loaded year for linebackers. And Notre Dame is going to get 3 top 100 players. And the kid that's not a top 100 player, Nolan Ziegler, I would argue has a ceiling about as high as those other 3 guys. Yeah. He's just still developing his body. He's not quite as big and filled out as some of those guys, although he's getting there. I saw some lacrosse video of him recently, and he's getting there. But it's an incredibly athletic group. It's a very talented group. There's some other guys that the secondary is the other position that they have to get the guys that I like in the secondary. Yeah. And we won't get into those names just yet. But yeah, I think that linebacker duo, that's one they've got to do. And I think that would send a big statement. It wouldn't just help the depth chart, but it's kind of like it says like, okay, Marcus Freeman can recruit with anybody.
Yeah.
Anybody.
When
he's got the Notre Dame brand behind him. Anybody. And you went out to California. If you're able to make this happen, you're able to go out to California and beat USC and beat Texas and all those players for Junior 2 Alamaka. You went up to Michigan and beat them for 2 linebackers, including one who grew up a Michigan fan, and Josh Burnham.
Yeah.
And then you go down to South Carolina and get a top 100 recruit in Jalen Sneed. I mean, Notre Dame doesn't exactly go into South Carolina and have a ton of success.
That's Clemson country.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they got, I think, Troy Pride was the last one. And then now the kids they've got from South Carolina are good football players. Obviously Chris Brown was another one. Everett Golson was from South Carolina. But Jalen Sneed, these aren't guys that are like in Fort Wayne or Indianapolis or Chicago. These are cats that they're going all over the country to get. And I think that says a lot about Marcus Freeman. And here's another thing. Notre Dame was basically on the outside looking in with Josh Burnham when Marcus Freeman got hired. They hadn't even offered Sneed or Tuihalamaka when Marcus Freeman was hired. So it's not like, Clark Lee had put them in position and Marcus Freeman just kind of had don't screw it up, which is kind of what I felt like the 2019 O-line class with like Quinn Carroll and Chris Stoffa and Zeke Correll. It's like Harry Heastand to put you in position to where you just didn't need to screw it up, and Coach Quinn didn't screw it up. He got those kids. This is a different deal. 3 of the 4 linebackers that they would get in that scenario in which they were to, let's say, get those 2 players in June. You're talking about 3 of those dudes you had really not much of a shot with when he got hired. So I think it speaks volumes about what he can do. Liam Gaming with an interesting question, Sean. I'll get your thoughts on this. I saw that you asked this at the end of the last show, but I had kind of ended it before that one went through, and I apologize. But it says, do you prefer one-on-one blocking or zone blocking? So basically gap schemes or zone schemes, and why? And which is easier for an inexperienced offensive line? Why don't you go ahead with that one, Sean?
I'll start with it probably depends on who's teaching it. I'll say that first. My lean, based upon the teams that I've liked, the running games that I've liked over the years, is zone blocking.
Mm-hmm.
Because I believe zone blocking is basically, and this comes from me talking to, as I said before, guys that I know that played the game, giving your best players the ability to use their legs and use their eyes. That's what makes them great, especially at the running back position. See the gap, anticipate, put your foot in the ground, go.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, zone blocking is very, very much I would pretty much say the 5 best running games I like in the history of football, whether it's NFL or college, all were zone blocking teams.
I'm going to hope that the 98 Broncos team is part of that conversation.
98 Broncos,
okay,
absolutely.
Because we might have accidentally had to, we lost connection with Sean. I don't know what happened.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. They would probably be number 2 on the list.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'd probably be
Terrell Davis had 8 straight 100-yard rushing games in the postseason, right? And yeah. So, I mean, that was –
if you're going to one-on-one block, then you must have 5 studs across that line.
You got to be bigger too.
Yeah, and
that's the other thing. That's the other thing. And that's something too, Sean. I don't know how much you get this, but I get this a lot. I get a lot of people saying Notre Dame's got to get bigger. They got to get more big offensive linemen, and look at Alabama. Well, Alabama runs a different offense than Notre Dame does, run game wise. Right? Notre Dame has been a primarily zone team, and the run they like the most has been outside zone. You don't want a bunch of 325-pound, slow-footed dudes running that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So that's the other thing I like about it too is I'm a zone guy. That's personal preference. I'll say this though. I think if you got the right coach and then you recruit to your scheme,
yes,
both of them work. It's just but I do think zone is easier for younger linemen because the thing about the zone is the rules don't change.
Nope.
The rules are what they are. It's am I covered or uncovered? I mean, it really is that simple. And now getting used to the looks and the movements and the footwork and all that stuff requires teaching, but the rules for zone blocking are relatively it is what it is, and I think that's something that should help this offensive line make a quicker adjustment is because they are a zone oriented team. Now you're seeing more and more teams nowadays that do both. They run man and zone schemes, or gap schemes. And Notre Dame is certainly going to do that, but you can rely on that zone early on a little bit more when you have – and Notre Dame added the mid-zone last year, which is a nice wrinkle. I actually like that. A mid-zone is essentially – it's going to look more like an outside zone play, but it's more of a downhill, kind of a – it's not – I mean, it's mid-zone. It's not fast swipe. It's not slow swipe. But it's meant to get a little bit more manipulation and get more of a vertical push than maybe the inside zone, which is the inside zone is meant to hit backside. I mean, you know that. Mid-zone is more of a front side running play that's not a full stretch. And so I think they've got a few more wrinkles with it. They can lead block with the mid-zone a little bit more last year, which is partly why it was effective because you had Tommy Trumbull doing that. So I don't know how much of that they'll do this year, but I'm personally a zone guy, but at the end of the day, it's what I feel about defense. Whether you're a 3-4, 3-3, 4-2-5, 4-3, whatever. If you got the right coach and you recruit to your scheme effectively, you can be effective. But if I was running an offense and Sean was my offensive line coach, we're running zone. We're running the zone.
Absolutely. Does it give your recruiting? Now, you just said something. Does it make it easier when you run a zone system? Does it give you more flexibility on the recruiting trail and when you're teaching multiple positions to your players?
Yes. Oh, 100%. Because in a gap scheme, certain positions are going to be on the move a lot more than others.
Right.
Where with zone, it's kind of like, guard, tackle. There's some interchangeableness when it comes to the run game. Now, the pass game offers some differences. You can't have you can't have 5 guards out there.
Right.
But you can have, 5 tackles out there. But yeah, I think it gives you some flexibility in that regard, Sean. I think another thing that it does too is and the reason why it gives you more versatility, and you know this, you're setting me up, so I appreciate that, is your rules are the same. It's not here's what the guards rules are, here's what the tackles rules are. Everybody's got the same rules. It's covered versus uncovered, right? So covered basically means, so if I'm lined up here as a 3 technique, and if I have a guy lined up on one of my shoulders, then I'm covered. If a team is running, let's say an odd front, right, and they've got a 5 technique on my tackle, a 5 technique on the other tackle, and then a center that's in the nose, if I'm a guard, I'm uncovered. And so then my rules are going to be different. And then, of course, am I uncovered inside or, to the call side, away from the call side? So there's all those types of things. But it's essentially, no matter whether you're playing center, guard, or tackle, your rules are your rules. They don't change. And I think that is where it can be easier for younger players to more quickly transition into that look. And why I think that you want to make sure that whatever you do, Notre Dame, figure out your line as quickly as possible for that very reason. So those players have more time to work on that. And I do think they have a system in place that should allow them to be effective with younger guys. John Klimek down here, my man. Thank you so much for the super chat. Appreciate it very much. And he says that Coach Freeman, Marcus Freeman, goes man-to-man a lot. Is that more attractive to recruit? What do cornerback recruits look for in the defense? Hit that thumbs up, folks. So, Sean, I'm curious to kind of get your NFL take on this, but I think most big-time corners want to play man. I do. Now, I think the type of man they like to play may vary. Some guys might like playing more off-man. Champ Bailey was an off-man guy. Yeah. He just liked playing off-man more. Who was it? Nnamdi Asomugha, right? What he was a guy that was an off-man guy. And then when he went to the Eagles and they tried to make him press, he
struggled. Yeah.
So, but they like to play man. Most good corners don't like playing zone because it's usually because I'm not good enough to play man. So I do think that's going to be attractive to recruit, Sean. I do. And I think when you look at the NFL, we're seeing more and more man being played in the NFL too. And so I think that's something that's going to help as well.
Multiple factors that go into this, right? By the way, your Denver Broncos just got one of the best off-man cover guys.
Yeah.
Kyle Fuller on the Chicago Bears. So
Mm-hmm.
your defense is going to be a lot better this year with that guy. You look at the Alabama kids, right?
They also got one of those.
They did. But if you look at the Alabama defensive backs, they come to the NFL and they end up, because they play handsy and they're very physical. Well, when you get to the NFL, then the talent is much more on an even playing field. Then every week you're going out there at Alabama, and your front seven is so much more dominant than the offensive line that they're facing. And you can take chances, you can be physical, you can jump routes. There's a transition, and you see guys like a Marlon Humphrey who struggles maybe for a year to a year and a half, but then all of a sudden he gets it and his career takes off and he's doing great things with Baltimore. I think you'll see the same thing with Patrick Surtain. He's very aggressive, very physical, but there are some things he's going to have to learn because he realizes, look, I just can't take chances and do what I did because there are a lot of NFL players out here that are just as good as me that I'm facing on the other side. So I think all great recruits, that's just competitive nature. You want to beat the person in front of you. I don't care what position you play. So yes, the great ones that think they are great, they want to play man-to-man, no matter what level you're on. But the technique and coming to understand what makes you play your best is the most important thing. As you said before, Nnamdi Asomugha, if he had stayed in that system, Kyle Fuller, he knows that he's a great off-man guy.
There's a reason he signed so quickly with Denver.
Absolutely.
Because he knows, hey, when I was playing with Coach Fangio in Chicago, that's when I was at my best.
Absolutely.
Fits me.
And you don't look at Richard Sherman in that Super Bowl with the 49ers. They asked him to play bump and run late in the fourth quarter. He gets beat. That's not his game.
It was never his game.
No, it's never his game.
It's definitely not now.
Yeah. You want to be competitive. That's just anybody. So, yes, most great defensive backs want to play man-to-man, but it's all about that player, who's developing them, what system they're in, and what's going to bring the best out of their gifts and talents. That's what they really want to do at the end of the day.
And I think most smart corners also look at what's being recruited in front of them. Not in front of them on the cornerback depth chart, but in front of them on the defense. Because they understand, like, look, I don't care how good I am. I need to go somewhere they can get after the quarterback. So I think being effective when it comes to recruiting cornerbacks is going to be aided by the success Notre Dame has had developing defensive linemen. But even more so, if he can develop a more disruptive defense up front, it's going to make playing cornerback even more attractive. And the unique thing, you mentioned Patrick Surtain and you mentioned the Alabama corners, but the other thing is the reason I think a lot of them have struggled because, like you said, they teach a very handsy type of style of play. He teaches man coverage completely different technically than almost everybody. He's very unique in how he, that butt to the sideline. He doesn't believe in back pedals and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I think that has been able to mask some athleticism deficiencies from some of those guys, like Dia Milner, for example. I think Dre Kirkpatrick is another one. And that's why a lot of the Alabama corners haven't actually been that good in the NFL. Now, Marlon Humphrey has kind of come around, but as you said, there was an adjustment period with Marlon Humphrey where he had to adjust to a different style of play. And I think Patrick Surtain has his background, who his dad is going to help him to be a little bit more schooled in the different ways to do it. So I do like that pick, but I always get a little nervous when an Alabama cornerback gets picked because you just wonder, like, was he good because he's that good, or was he good because, as you said, he was part of a great system and a great entire unit? And that's why I don't think they've necessarily been as good in the pros as they were in college, in my opinion. And Josh Jobe is getting a lot of hype now too. He was the other corner in Alabama last year. Don't buy the hype,
man.
Do not buy the hype. Just if you don't believe me, go watch the Florida game. Go watch him trying to cover Kadarius Toney.
And Kadarius Toney had a field day.
He was crushing Josh Jobe. So anyway, but he is definitely, in my opinion, a product of a system. But yes, I do think it makes it more attractive. And again, thank you for the super chat on that, my man.
How honest are you? You've recruited, you've coached on the college level. When you're recruiting a kid and you're watching his tape, he might want to go to a system that's more like Alabama, bump and run. Are you honest enough as a coach to say, look, I've watched your tape. Off man is the best thing for you. Here is why.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why it's going to make you a great NFL player.
I think you have to. Because, look, if another school's convincing a kid of something that he's not, you're not going to win that battle, especially if it's like Alabama. Like, if Alabama's convinced a kid, hey, you're going to fit what we do, then you're not going to win that battle by saying, no. We do that too, and you can fit great here. Come to us instead. No, I'm going to go to Alabama that produces first-round draft picks every year, right? You don't have to be that good at Alabama to become a first-round draft pick because you're going to get overdrafted because you played at Alabama. I think you got to convince them on it, and I think kids are I think smart coaches can also do, like, to your point, say, hey, you know what? You ever heard Champ Bailey? Oh, yeah. Okay, he was an off-man guy.
Off-man guy.
Right. And here's the benefits of being an off-man guy. You're gonna make a lot more plays on the ball. You're gonna have more interception attempts. You're gonna have more PBU attempts, those kind of things, right? And it's gonna give you more scheme versatility when you're the NFL. Because you're gonna get your chances to come play man-to-man, bump and run for us, but we're gonna also allow you to play some off and those type of things. And so I think as a coach, you do need to be honest with those guys, assuming that's what you're looking for. Assuming you're looking for a guy that's going to play more off man. But I think anytime you can sit a kid down and show him film of what you do and how he fits into it and why you think he fits even better in your scheme, that's going to give you a shot to get those kids. And we've talked about that at tight end, why Notre Dame's had so much success at tight end, because they can pop in the film and be like, look at that. Okay, this is what you do, and we do that, and that works for us. And I think that's worked for him. So Brian Dembo asks, when you do the O-line breakdown, will it be the line or by position, separate guard, tackle, or center show? We'll have one show, but within that show, we will break it down into, we'll talk guard, we'll talk tackles, and then we'll talk interior players. So I don't separate guard and center, because in the way that the game is run now, centers and guards have to play together so much. And so we'll do that. We'll break them down by position, but it'll just be one offensive line show. Dropping dimes. So this, Sean, this is sort of relevant for you, since this is going to be right in your backyard. But Dropping dimes is, what do you think about Notre Dame playing Wisconsin on Fox? Obviously, that game is going to be at noon at Soldier Field.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that game? First of all, that's normally the Gus Johnson slot.
Yeah.
And I cannot tell you how excited I am to hear, because this, Sean. I've told you this before. I don't listen to the broadcast when I'm breaking the game down and watching the game later. I mute it because I can't stand most announcers. I will absolutely have the volume on when I'm watching that game afterwards.
Right.
With Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt, because I actually think Joel Klatt's a really good color guy. I don't always agree with his analysis when he's on like Colin Cowherd and those kind of shows. But as a color guy doing games, I think he's really good, and I think that is an awesome pair. But Gus Johnson could make a 3-3 tie sound exciting. I mean, he really could.
Yeah. I am very excited, as you said before, because of Klatt and my God. I don't know, his name just escaped me. You just said it.
Gus Johnson.
Yeah, Gus Johnson and Klatt on the call. But I am upset about this game. I'll tell you why.
Kickoff time?
No, the kickoff time is pretty good. That allows me to walk over to the stadium and probably get back to the studio just in time to do the Sox night game. So I'm happy about that. But how in the world is Wisconsin a 4-point favorite?
Oh, I know.
On the opening line? Please explain this to me.
I can't.
Not the Wisconsin team I watched. And I know their defense is returning 80% of its production, but the quarterback is still Graham Mertz.
Right.
They have no one at running back. Offensive line is okay.
Good, but not a vintage.
Yeah.
It's not a vintage offensive line.
Good thing they did get their two top receivers to come back and take that extra year eligibility, which is going to Kendrick Pryor and Davis. Mm-hmm. That's going to help them a lot.
And they got their tight end coming back.
But I don't see it.
I agree.
I don't think they should have been favored if they had played last year up at Lambeau, and I don't think they should be favored. And then you have Jim. Don't get me wrong. Jim Leonard is a really good defensive coordinator. Mm-hmm. Really good defensive coordinator. I think he gets all of the juice out of the orange. Whatever's given to him, he squeezes everything out of it.
Yep.
And they play for the man. if Jack Cohn is the starting quarterback, and it'll be different if this was the first game. If you flip this game with the Florida State game, I might have a little bit more trepidation.
Because they have so much coming back.
Yes.
Right? Yes.
And that's the very first game for this offensive line for Notre Dame. You're giving Notre Dame 3 weeks or a couple of games to work out the kinks. Yeah. I really think Notre Dame is going to come into Soldier Field and they're going to establish themselves that week as, yep, you thought we're going to slip a little bit, but we're here.
You know, Sean, I think part of it is there's this weird thing in I say this loosely, analysis from a lot of the national media. And I had a little bit of I know you heard it, but I had a little bit of an anti-national media rant the other day because so much of it is just lazy, you know, and it's like, well, you know, Notre Dame loses this, and this with no concept whatsoever of Notre Dame's recent history of consistently replacing guys like they have been. You know, I mean, it's not like they got worse when they lost Quentin Nelson and Mike McGlinchey and Durham Smythe and those guys, right? They didn't get worse. They got even better the next year. You know, they lost Jerry Tillery, and the next year their defensive line was even better. You know, and Jonathan Bonner. They lost both of their starting interior players and got better the next year. One of them was a first-round pick. That same team, they also lost Drew Tranquil. They also lost Tavon Coney. They also lost Julian Love. And the next year, they were down at 11-2. You know, and then this year they come out and they lose Julian Okwara, they lose Khalid Kareem. You know, they lost some pretty important players. They lost Chase Claypool, Cole Kmet, who were beasts, and they went out and they were even better this year.
Yeah.
So it just Notre Dame's reloading at this point in time. So I just don't get this. Oh, Notre Dame's going to take this big step back thing. It to me, it's just sloppy analysis. It's you living in the past, or A, or B. You're just trying to get clicks. I mean, or maybe both. It could be both. But to your point, I mean, I watched Wisconsin a lot last year. And unless you're still thinking that Michigan game was some kind of great win and you haven't accepted the fact that Michigan sucked last year, like they were awful last year, then I don't know what to tell you. I mean, maybe you thought Michigan was better than they were, you know, because that really impressive overtime win over Rutgers really impressed you about Michigan. But, you know, and I like Graham Mertz. I actually think Graham's going to be fine. I think, he's rookie and all. But, yeah, okay, Notre Dame lost 4 stars in the offensive line. But who in the secondary at Wisconsin is going to run with Michael Mayer? Who's going to run with Kevin Austin? Who's going to run with Braden Lindsey? Who's going to run with Avery Davis? Who's going to run with Lawrence Keys and those kind of guys? You know what I mean? And so I just don't see this whole, Notre Dame's going to take its big step back thing. You know, will they make the playoff or not? They could not make the playoff and still not really take a step back. The schedule's tougher this year.
Yeah.
You know, but Wisconsin is, to me, there's a lot of people say, well, it's their toughest game. I think the game that they play the week after is going to be tougher than that one because Cincinnati has more athletes on offense than Wisconsin does. And I also think schematically, Wisconsin doesn't do things schematically that are going to give Notre Dame a lot of problems on defense, in my opinion. They're all, and that's why they have a hard time beating Ohio State. You know, they battle Ohio State because Wisconsin is an incredibly well-coached team. I'll always believe that. It's one of the best coached teams in the country, in my opinion. But at the end of the day, those aren't the teams that have been beating Notre Dame. The teams that have been beating Notre Dame the last 4 years are teams that have equal or superior talent. And Wisconsin does not have equal to or superior talent than Notre Dame.
No.
And at the end of the day, there's more matchups that I'd be worried about if I was Wisconsin athletically than matchups that I'm going to be worried about from Notre Dame athletically. And I think that's where the game is going to be decided.
And Dropping Dimes may be asking about, I think technically it is a home game, right, for Notre Dame? This is the home game because it was in Lambeau last year.
But see, this is a Wisconsin game. That was so weird about it. So
really,
common sense would tell you that the Lambeau game should have been a Wisconsin one, but that was going to be on NBC. That was technically considered a Notre Dame home game. Since this is on Fox because it's a Wisconsin home game because it's a Big Ten home game.
Got you. Now it makes sense.
Kind of dumb, if you ask me, but that's what they agreed to. It's going to work out. It's going to work out well for Notre Dame. Because
absolutely.
You can call it whatever you want, but the fact is I think that's going to be more of a Notre Dame crowd than it's going to be a Wisconsin crowd. So we'll see. Joseph Wan says, I'm worried that Notre Dame is going to take Anderson over Xavier Bradshaw. I am too. I would think that Reese would want someone like Bradshaw on his new offense. How much say does Reese have in receiver recruiting? He has a lot of say in receiver recruiting. I mean, he's the offensive coordinator, and I don't know if I don't know if it's a situation where they are necessarily taking him over Bradshaw as opposed to just taking Nick Anderson as, he's just a take in their mind. I'm still not as sold on that as others are. I still think a lot of this is going to be dependent upon how some other visits go. But my concern, and I've teased this before, and I'm going to have something on this early next week, is I'm a little puzzled, and I wrote a little bit about it in midweek musings. I'm a little puzzled by Notre Dame's receiver recruiting, because Brian Kelly keeps talking about how we don't have enough playmakers, we don't have enough playmakers, and then they continue to recruit guys like Nick Anderson, who is a really solid, well-coached, good route-running receiver. And we talked about that when we did the breakdown on him. And I think ultimately, Sean, I think that's the reason they like Nick Anderson, is because he's going to step foot on campus as one of the better route runners in the country, in my opinion. And I think they look at him as an easy-to-coach kid. And that's what Brian Kelly has preferred on offense for years, is don't give me the real raw kid I got to coach up, because we saw what happened with Miles Boykin and Chase Claypool. It's going to take you 3 or 4 years to get those guys going. They want the guy that just steps on the field and he knows how to run routes and he knows how to play and he knows how to do all those kind of things, and they don't have to coach him up. It's a little bit easier to work with those kind of guys, as opposed to a guy like Xavier Bradshaw, that this kid needs some work, but he's smaller. People say that they're worried about his size. Well, I don't know if you watched the Clemson game, either one where you couldn't cover Amari Rodgers,
right,
or the Alabama game where you couldn't cover John Mechie and Devontae Smith. Maybe you didn't pay attention to those games since you were going against their defense, not their offense. But I think the first receiver, the first receiver drafted this year was like 6'1". The next receiver drafted was like 5'10". The next receiver drafted was about $165 in full pads, right? So, I think you need a balance of big and small, and I'm concerned that Notre Dame's 2020 recruiting efforts have been focused on, again, the bigger guys, which, I don't know. I'm not going to try to put nefarious motives behind it. It's just puzzling, and I think it's kind of, be honest with you, a little bit lazy. Maybe they're just worried about they don't have a good enough receivers coach to coach kids up. But if you believe that, then go find a new receivers coach.
We just want game changers, right?
Right.
Game changers, they change. That's what I call game changers. They change everything, and they impact every other position on the offense. I use the basketball analogy. A lot of people look at guys like Trae Young or Damian Lillard. Of course, Trae Young ended up at Oklahoma, but Trae Young got late buzz in high school. Mm-hmm. And the late buzz came because he played AAU next to Michael Porter Jr., who was the #1 player in the class. And they see this kid that's throwing all the alley-oops and shooting threes, like, okay, who is this kid playing with him? Maybe we need to look at this kid too. And then Damian Lillard gets no buzz, being the best player in the Bay Area, and he ends up having to go to Boise State. And now look at these two guys in the playoffs right now and how they're performing. Mm-hmm. And at the most important position, in my opinion, that changes the entire offense, because they get into the lane and create for everybody else. Mm-hmm. This is what great receivers can do for your offense and help alleviate pressure off your quarterback and your run game and your offensive line. They can get open quicker. You don't have to sit back in the pocket 5 or 6 seconds waiting for them to get open. You can throw them a little swing pass, and they can bust it for 50. You can give them a sweep. They can bust it for 40 and a touchdown. These are the type of game-changing players you need to get, especially if you're coming out publicly and saying, we need more playmakers. Mm-hmm. We'll go get them, because they're littered across the United States. They don't have to be 5 stars. You find them in each and every conference in Division I football. You see them. So whether it's, SEC, ACC, you have to go out to the Big West, a Mountain Conference, or any other smaller conference. There are playmakers. Look at Darnell Mooney, who was a big playmaker as a rookie, dropped only 1 pass. He went 15 games before he dropped his first pass for the Chicago Bears. He came from Tulane, but he's a playmaker. 2-star coming out of high school.
Yep.
So you just have to do a better job, hit the tape, watch the tape, scout these guys, go find them,
Take some chances. That's the other thing.
Absolutely.
Is take some chances. I mean, like Nick Anderson's a good football player. Don't get me wrong. I mean, but he doesn't dominate in high school because he's not a dominant athlete. He's good because he's a really good route runner. He has good size. Well, the problem is he gets into college and guys are bigger and stronger and more, and the players who maybe are his superiors athletically but not technically are then going to become technically proficient, and then they're going to be able to slow him down. And that's kind of my issue is then are you going to take 4 receivers? Okay, so then you take what? CJ Williams and Tobias Merriweather. Okay, who's the guy you're throwing a screen to? Who's the guy you're going to try to get slants to? Who's the guy that you're going to throw the RPOs to?
Yeah,
because you just got a bunch of X's and W's, and that's kind of my issue for it. All right. Brian Dembo says, hey, Coach, what's your thoughts on a Hey Rookie type of show about the draft class? I've never seen that show.
The ESPN.
I've never watched it.
Yeah, they chronicle and follow the guys throughout the process in their training and talking to their agents and meet their families, talk to their families, give you a little background on each and every rookie. They follow them to all of the NFL symposiums where they speak to ex-NFL players and they advise them on finances and how to stay out of trouble, how to manage your time, how to be a pro, basically. Mm-hmm. And then they have this big dinner, maybe like a week before, where they all go out, all the top prospects. And it was actually pretty good this year because some of them had some quirks. You saw Justin Fields. All of them were riding him. They went to a steakhouse, and he didn't see anything on the menu that he liked because he's a vegan, right? So everybody else is sitting there with T-bone steaks and 24-ounce bone-in ribeyes.
Couldn't live that way.
Yeah,
I couldn't live as vegan. Life would be not worth living at that point in time.
And they're just riding them. They're riding them the entire night, and they bring him out like a plate of asparagus and a salad, and he's just sitting there at the end of the table, just shaking his head. Mm-hmm. I'm like, kid, come on, take one bite, just one bite. It won't hurt you. But he's committed to this diet that he started once he got to Ohio State. So kudos to him for having the discipline.
And I do think it is something that requires a lot of discipline, which can be beneficial to you in a lot of other ways as a football player.
Yeah.
Maybe not so much. I'm not talking about health-wise. I'm just talking about, just really establishing yourself as someone who is disciplined in how you go about your business, because I could not do it. I'd last about a day and a half, maybe.
What Notre Dame did with the videos for the recruits for the 21 class, following them around for a day, they did like a minute and a half to 2 minutes. For each recruit. I think it was really good and kind of along the lines of, hey, rookie, the same thing the NFL does. And Notre Dame is stepping up when it comes to promoting this program.
Oh, gosh, big time. We got a question that's somewhat going to be about that, but I want to get this Nick Anderson question in first.
Okay.
It says, Sean Rogers says, I see Nick Anderson trending to Notre Dame. Is he a take? If so, does this mean Notre Dame is trailing on our big 3 receivers on the board, and is Notre Dame backing off Bradshaw? Notre Dame isn't necessarily backing off Bradshaw, but they're not pushing for him right now, which I've heard 2 different answers to that question, but my gut is that they're not pushing for him right now because they haven't scheduled a visit for him in June, which I think is a mistake. I don't think it's that they're trailing for the big 3. It's that I think 2 of the big 3 are going to carry their recruitments into the fall, and I think Notre Dame is panicking, because I don't think there's a lot of faith in their receivers coach to be able to win those recruiting battles. And so they're taking a solid, ready to, high floor, low ceiling guy like Nick Anderson and taking them and just kind of saying, hey, we'll get a guy and a good player. And I just think it's what they've been doing for too long on offense and recruiting, a little bit before the Chip Long era, because Chip would go after some of those guys. He would battle for some of those higher ceiling guys. And I just think that's my thoughts behind it. Now, I also still don't think that Nick Anderson is the definite going to Notre Dame that some people think that he is. I think there's some other things that are going to happen on visits that could shake that up. Yeah. But, we'll see how it goes. Sean, here's an interesting question, and this is something that you and I have not talked about. So I'm very curious what your thoughts are going to be on this. This is from D-Rock. Brian and Sean, your thoughts on Thursday's proposed bill that would make college athletes at public schools employees and then let them collectively bargain. Even though the Supreme Court, I believe, has already ruled that they can't,
right,
there's still a legislative bill that's going to say that they can. So there's going to be some legal challenges to that could, they can pass all the bills they want, but if it gets rejected in Congress again, then it's going to happen, because we've seen this push happen before. Some kids at Northwestern pushed for that. But anyway, what's your opinion on this, Sean?
Well, I'll go back and let's start with the decision by Governor Kemp down in Georgia and the legislation he put forth, which, in my opinion, Kirby Smart had to be in his office pulling his hair out, because there's no way you can try to limit what kids can make off of that likeness to 30%.
Right.
And then divvy up the rest amongst the state and the school. And that's horrible. So that was like one of the worst things that anyone can do from a legislative standpoint. Now, what we're talking about, the proposed bill with these athletes at public schools being able to collectively bargain, it's a step forward, but in my opinion, it's still kind of connected to the NCAA model of handling college athletes. College athletes at some point are going to realize that they're really their own business, and they're going to start to realize it at an early age. And you're starting to see player empowerment go through each and every league on a professional level. I mean, look at the power play that Aaron Rodgers is trying to pull right now.
Who's a professional athlete.
Yes.
Right. That's the difference.
NFL owners are scared to death.
Right.
Right. Because Deshaun Watson tried it. And then, of course, his legal issues kept him from following through or anything happening.
He still thinks he can force a trade out of Houston.
Well, at this point, with everything that's going on, Brian, from a PR standpoint, can they bring him back?
I mean, but you can't trade him, though. I mean, that's the thing, is you can't trade him.
Right. So
you can say, hey, look, we're going to let we support Deshaun. We're going to let the legal process, because you need him to increase his value. So you almost have to, because they're saying, like, what now? They're not going to be able to, like, this isn't going to, like, the trial and stuff and the interviews aren't going to start to, like, 2022. You're going to get to the whole season.
Right.
Like, look, we support Deshaun. We believe in the American system of justice, of innocent until proven guilty, and all this other stuff. And that is true. I mean, right now, these are just accusations.
Yeah.
He has vehemently pushed back against it. From what I have read, him and his staff have said, we're not willing to pay to make this go away, which to me is something you do if you feel that you're truly innocent of what you're doing. Now, not every person who thinks they're innocent is actually innocent. They live in a fantasy world of, hey, I didn't do anything wrong.
Absolutely.
But they need his value to get back up. And the only way to do that is for him to go on the football field and play.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, because there's no one's going to a team may trade for him, but you're not going to get anything for it.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
The report came out this week. There are 5 teams still highly interested. And it's a seesaw, right? Because from a PR standpoint for that organization, they have to be saying, like, if we actually bring him back, what's the backlash? Especially from our female fans. Like, what's the backlash in this community? So to move forward, really to get to the point to say, young athletes are starting to realize, by not only watching professional athletes, but just watching the ability to monetize anything that your talent gives you. And it's starting at a much younger age. We're seeing 13, 14-year-old millionaires from TikTok and all of these other things. So when you start thinking about that, there's no way, I believe, that college athletes are going to allow themselves to be put into a pigeonhole of just being employees and being able to be taxed and controlled.
Because that right there is what this is all about.
It's all about taxing.
It's all about the government saying, we want to cut.
Yes.
We know they're going to make some money, and we want to get our hands on it.
Because they see it writing on the wall. They see it.
I think that right there is where this is all about. And I'm very much against it. I think that to some degree, and we can have this, maybe we can have a show about this, Sean, because I think you and I are going to have some areas where we agree and some areas where we don't on this. I am not a fan of necessarily allowing players to just maximize whatever their profit is from being a part of your football program.
Right.
The difference between football players in college and a guy like Aaron Rodgers is negotiating a contract extension based on him playing out his previous contract. Well, a contract for a college football player is you have 5 years to play 4.
Right.
There's no negotiation for, well, I want to get paid X because I did this. No, you're gone. You're going to another program. And if NFL teams had a similar situation, it would basically be you can't re-sign a guy after 5 years. You can't re-sign him. He's got to go somewhere else, right? And so it's different for college. They can't, you can't say, hey, look, I'm going to do this. I think the other thing that some people aren't getting is they say, well, the game is about the players, not in college. Because it doesn't matter who's putting on the Duke uniform. The face of that program is Mike Krzyzewski.
Right.
Right. There's nobody on Notre Dame's 2015 team. There's nobody on that team left from player standpoint.
Yeah.
It's just Brian Kelly. And so it is a little different, but I also feel like I'm a big proponent of amateurism, but I think the manner in which we view amateurism for college athletes is misguided. And I do think that there needs to be more compensation for players to be able to utilize. Look, if you're going to go create a big billboard in the sales pitch and you're going to put Ian Book's face on it and you're going to make money off of that, then why aren't these players getting some of that? But I think it should be done in different ways as opposed to just handing them paychecks. I think there's a lot of other things that they should be doing, putting money aside. Like I've advocated for years now, if you're going to sell jerseys, you take 15, 20% of those jersey sales, you put it aside, and when players graduate, you give them a cut of that, because that's going to then help them with their medical costs. And because most of those players aren't going to the NFL.
Yeah.
But when you're done playing at Notre Dame, you're still going to have medical costs. The school's not paying for it. You're not our player anymore. And so these kids are going to need some money to do that. And I think there's things like that they should have been doing for a long time. And this is where the NCAA is so stupid. They were and it was about greed. It wasn't about amateurism. It was about they wanted to keep their cut. They didn't want to be giving up that piece of the pie.
Yeah.
And so they were unwilling to do things that full cost of tuition. The fact that schools and leagues fought against that for so long is why they're now going to get completely screwed from a financial. If you'd have done more things to take care of players in those regards, not made these stupid decisions. Like, who was that kicker a couple years ago that had some kind of internet business that had nothing to do with being a football player? And he's a kicker at some school that nobody's, you know what I mean? Like, he's not making money because he's the kicker at so-and-so.
Right.
It's because he has this other talent. But when you push back against things like that, you set yourself up for this. So there's stupidity that's leading to this. The whole thing about being able to allow them to be unions and be employees, I think is a stupid argument, because you know what every person who is going to say, I advocate for them to be employees, is not going to do? Allow them to be fired. Because if you're an employee and you don't play well, you can be fired.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
So if you want to say, hey, we want to look at them as employees, that's cool. But you then need to allow coaches to fire them. So if you come in as a freshman and you don't live up to what we expected you to do, I can fire you because you're an employee now. Just like if I have a teacher that I hire, and in that teacher's first year, they do a poor job, I'm going to fire you.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the thing is everybody wants to say, athletes need to be employees. They're like employees. No, they're not, because number one, they can choose to go anywhere they want. It's like the whole transfer thing. Or you need to allow them to transfer. You can transfer. We're just saying you have to sit out a year, but you can transfer wherever the heck you want. This is a similar thing. If you want to be treated like employees, then you need to accept everything that comes with being an employee, meaning the school's going to get a bigger cut of what you do. We're going to take out this. We're going to take out that. And if you don't live up to our expectations, you're going to get fired. And so that's the thing is, if you're going to treat them like employees, then they need to be fully like employees. And a lot of people aren't going to like that. And I don't think this is about looking out for players. This is about government looking to get their hands on this beyond just the taxes that they're going to make off of it, right? And that's the thing for me, Sean. And I'm glad that you said that.
And it's just the cut.
At the end
We're talking about a cut of the money that is being seen.
Right.
We're not talking about the other money.
Right.
In NCAA football that floats around. I don't want to even get into that.
Right.
But this is just the money that's above board, So when you think about it, look, I'm not for it. I'm all for amateurism. And we have kids now. The amount of followers, I was talking to someone about this from the AAU basketball circuit. The amount of followers that these kids have. He said he came across a kid that had almost 2.5 million followers. And he wasn't even a starter on his AAU team. He said he went to see this kid because of the followers he had. And he looked up and he's like, you're not even the top 7 in the rotation. But he has that much power. And who's to say some company doesn't hit him up at 15 and say, man, can you market our stuff on your page? We'll pay you. Or we'll give you product. Now, does that become a problem in his recruiting? You know, once he's been paid. These are the things, and I think the NCAA needs to do a better job of catching up with the times and realizing where everything is, and just say, look, let's try to work together.
I think you just said something too, Sean, is you're talking about a kid that would be making money before he gets to the NCAA.
Yes.
That's like a different deal, because it's not like it's coming from Kentucky or Kansas or Georgetown or whatever. This is money that you've made before you got here.
But do you tell him to stop making the money?
No, you shouldn't. They would. They would.
Yeah.
That's why I do so basketball and football are two completely different animals. And that's the thing people have to understand that they don't get. Basketball is more of an individual thing, in my opinion. Football is much more of now, again, basketball is a team sport. What I'm talking about is I'm looking at it from a marketing standpoint. And a money standpoint. One basketball player can completely change the
program.
Right.
Yeah.
If the best quarterback in the country goes to Oregon State, they're still not going to be very good, because you need 2 linemen, a couple of receivers, 5 defensive players, and all that.
Absolutely.
But basketball is a little bit of a different animal, and that's why I do like the fact that there's this new league launching, and I'm actually hoping it has success, where they're guaranteeing $100,000 contracts and things like that, because for a kid like that, he can go play in that league, and he may only make $100,000, which isn't a lot compared to professional athletes, but he can do all the other stuff.
Right.
It's almost like a new and one league, right? But now imagine if and one, back when it was really big, had social media like it is today. I mean, those guys would be making so much money off of social media and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, think about like the Professor back in the day, right? If they had like TikTok and all that other stuff like they do now,
right?
I mean, and all those cats. I mean, you know, I mean, it's like the Ruck would be televised now, right? Like those games we used to have at the Ruck, or like they would come. There'd be some deal where they're going to televise those games on like ESPN2 or something, right?
I think Hot Sauce from N1. He's still in Atlanta. He gets paid like $10,000 a game every home game.
Yeah, it's insane.
They allow somebody to come out and try to stick him during a timeout.
Right.
And he gets paid for that.
Right.
You know,
but see, you can do that in basketball, and that's why I think basketball is going to be much harder to handle for the NCAA than football.
It's
going to be a lot harder to handle.
Yeah.
But I would like to see the NCAA get more competition for athletes for basketball. I really would, because basketball and football to me are also different. You can be 18 years old and be competitive against grown men when you're playing basketball.
You're a basketball player, yes.
That's not happening in the NFL.
No, not at all.
It's just not. It's a whole different animal, and people have to understand that. It's just a different beast. And so, that's why the NCAA, I actually have people that are mad at the NCAA for not allowing high school kids to go to the NBA. And I'm like, you do realize that has nothing to do with the NCAA, right? The NBA doesn't let high school players go to the NBA. It has nothing to do with the NCAA.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's an NBA rule. But the NCAA gets blamed for everything. I'm like, look, they do enough dumb stuff. We don't need to add stuff on that they're not actually doing. Like, that's not on them. You know, like they don't make college football players have to stay for 3 years. That's an NFL decision, not an NCAA decision, right? The NCAA can't keep dudes from going to the league. They have no say over that. But anyway, that was a good conversation, Sean. I thought that I think maybe we might have to do a show on that one of these days.
You know, because with the Billboard Blitz, the Billboard Blitz, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say someone in one of the players' hometown, right? Kyron Williams, car dealership in St. Louis says, man, we want you to come before you go back for fall camp. We want you to come here and sign some autographs here, right? We're going to pay you this amount of money. Who do they talk to?
Right.
Do they call Kyron? Do they call Notre Dame? Do they call the NCAA to set it up? Like, how does it go?
In my opinion, it needs to go through the schools.
Okay.
Because I think these young people need protections from getting taken advantage of. Kyron needs to have somebody in Notre Dame he can call to make sure that this car dealership's not screwing him over.
Right.
Hey, we'll pay you $25 per autograph. Well, what are you charging per autograph? $500. He's going to get a bigger cut than that.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so I do think that's where the NCAA and these colleges need to be protecting these kids. Is let's make sure that we're not doing things to, we're going to limit how much you can make. There needs to be some of that, because then you start getting to they're not really paying for that. They're just trying to give this kid recruiting benefits or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But legitimately protecting these kids so that if there is someone in their hometown that wants them to do a TV show, that we have a general idea of what these kids are worth. And understand that Ian Book is going to be worth more than, Ron Paulus III. That's just a fact, right?
Yeah.
But how do you handle that? Because then you start saying, well, you start getting some feelings getting hurt. Why so-and-so getting this and I'm getting $150? You know what I mean? So there's a lot that's going to go into this and my fear is that they're going to rush into this way too fast, and this is going to create a nightmare. But that's what the NCAA does, right? But let's not actually think about what's right. Let's just do what is going to,
do what's best for these kids and for everyone involved.
Right. And they don't do that. They do what's best for the NCAA.
I know the fans want NCAA football back really fast, but let's just do the right thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it should. I mean, here's the thing: is the right thing is just the money you used to pay schools. Just give that to the kids now.
Absolutely.
Right, because I think it was I saw some schools would make like $110,000 off of the. You get that from EA Sports. Just here's the fee that you pay all the schools, and the kids on your team you split it up.
Yep.
I mean, amongst all your scholarship players. I mean, to me, it's not really that complicated. And and that's what all these schools these kids deserve. We're not going to support EA Sports because we want to make sure the players. Okay, so are you going to are you going to repay all the players in the past for the money you made off EA Sports? And the I mean, you going to do that?
Yeah.
Because if you pay a kid $110,000, if you pay a school $110,000, every kid is getting about $1,300. If you have 85 scholarship players, you're getting about $1,300 from that.
Right.
That's not chump change, right? I mean, that actually allows you to go buy the system and to have the game yourself, and then you still got some money left over to do whatever the heck you want to do with it. So I'd like to see that. So let's get back to some football. Four Horsemen says, just rewatched the first half of the Cincinnati-Georgia game last year. They returned a ton, and they are good. Notre Dame fans are overlooking them. Thankfully, our coaching staff won't. I hope that's not a response to you thinking we're overlooking them, because I thought we made it pretty clear that Cincinnati is going to be one of the better teams Notre Dame's going to face. However, they do return a lot. But I don't think anyone at Notre Dame would say, hey, we want to trade our roster for your roster. Now there's some players I wouldn't mind having. If Ahmad Gardner and Majai Sanders wanted to transfer to Notre Dame to follow Marcus Freeman, would I say no? Nope. I would not say no. Would not say no at all. But Notre Dame still, to me, has the better team, top to bottom. And I'd say this: there's a lot more guys that if you could get Cincinnati in an honest moment, that they'd be wanting to take from Notre Dame than what Notre Dame would be wanting to take from Cincinnati. But we're definitely not overlooking them, because I think it's going to be one of their 3 or 4 best opponents. But at the end of the day, you can't discount the loss of Marcus Freeman.
No.
And it's not just Marcus Freeman. In a 2-year stretch, they lost Mike Mickens, then they lost Marcus Freeman. People aren't talking enough about the loss of Mike Mickens, because Mike Mickens is the one that laid that foundation for how good the secondary was.
Yeah.
And now you've lost the architect of that in Marcus Freeman. And I think that double hit in back-to-back years is gonna hurt them a little bit. But they have a lot of talent.
I think what you said is right on par. We're right on point. If you watch that game, Four Horsemen said he rewatched the game. Cincinnati had an opportunity to really put Georgia away early in that game. Mm-hmm. This is just my opinion. Mm-hmm. And because of the inconsistency at the quarterback position, I think they weren't able to take advantage of some of the advantages they had early on.
Yeah. Michael Young was going off against them early.
Halftime, Georgia went in, made some adjustments, and then all of a sudden you started to see the tide of that game turn a little bit.
Right.
I'll go and look. The Cincinnati DBs, I love them, but Pickens was having his way a little bit, even in the first half.
I mean, that's what Georgia's offense was. They had like 4 or 5 big plays.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Yeah.
I mean, Cincinnati's defensive front did really well against Georgia. Really well.
They did.
The problem was, to your point, Sean, in the second half, it became about Georgia's front against Cincinnati's offensive line, and that's when the game turned.
That's when the game turned, yeah.
And that's going to be, to me, the same matchup problem that we're going to see this year, in my opinion. All right, Shane O'Shea, great cornerback breakdown show. Thank you, Shane. I'm glad that you had a chance to watch that. Shane then asks, what are your thoughts on the new O-line offer to Ryan Baer? Is this a case where the staff likes him so much or not feeling confident where the other O-line board stands? I don't have an answer to this, meaning I haven't talked to anyone at Notre Dame about this. I just take it as no one's committed. They haven't filled up the class yet with public or silent commitments, and so you continue to recruit good players. My issue with Ryan Baer specifically, so I had a chance to see Ryan Baer in person at the Columbus camp, and he's a big sucker. He's a lot like Liam Eichenberg, in my opinion, where he's not necessarily a fat kid. He's just broad shoulders, big head, big thighs, big feet, just kind of has that Midwestern country boy gait, just a big joker, right? Like you see a lot of those kids from Ohio.
Yeah.
And, but the problem is he's real quick off the ball, powerful and all that kind of stuff. But he's a guard, in my opinion. He's not a tackle. And so to me, I think it's a thing where I hope that they're looking at him as an interior player. That'd be my only question is, are you looking at him as an interior guy or tackle guy? That'd be my only question mark. And if you're looking at him as an interior guy and he's just another guy on the board, because like, for example, I have great confidence Notre Dame's going to get Billy Schrauth. Great confidence in that one.
Okay.
I think Notre Dame leads for Carson Hinsman. But Carson Hinsman's not the lock to me that Billy Schrauth is. Iowa's pushing. Wisconsin's pushing. It's going to be a tougher sell. So do you wait till he decides to go to another school and then offer Ryan Baer, who's now made his official visits in June?
Right.
Or do you be proactive and go after this kid now, knowing that, we've got a relationship to build and he's not going to commit tomorrow, right? And do it that way. I think that's what they're doing, and I'm okay with that. I'm good with that. I think that they should always have a bigger board and then treat those kids who maybe aren't your priority recruits like you love them, so that way you don't have to overcome being way behind when you miss out on those other kids. And so I think it's a smart recruiting strategy as long as they're doing what I just said they're doing, which is this is just another good player on the board. And if things don't go the way that we hope they go in June, we need to have guys that are on the board that we've already started recruiting, not waiting until that point in time. Because if you wait till after June to get on kids, because you strike out on Jake Taylor, you strike out on Joe Bruner, you strike out on Carson Hinsman. Taylor, Hinsman, and Bruner would be my preferred order of preference there, by the way. But if you strike out on those guys and you get Billy Schrauth, you've only got 3 linemen. You need another dude. And then you're like, well, who's on the board now? I'm not going to get Zach Rice, at least that you're not as of right now. So who's on the board? And then you wait then to – a lot of these kids are taking 4 or 5 visits now. They won't have official visits left. So I think this is smart recruiting if they're doing it the way that I think they're doing it.
And I think the O-line position at Notre Dame is one of those positions when you get kids in the building, you just walk them down the hallway.
Yep.
You see all these kids in the NFL?
Yep.
This is not like the past.
Yeah.
This is what we do here.
Yeah. This is just the last 5 years.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, hey, kid, you know how many teams have had more first-round picks in the last 6 years than we have?
Yeah.
On offensive line? I'll help you out. The answer is nobody. The answer is 0.
Yeah.
They can do it offensive line what Alabama can do at corner and some of those other spots. But you got to get them on campus first, and you need to make sure you're in that fight. So we'll see how it goes. All righty. Thomas Walsh says, I just got the new SI hard copy issue. They had an article on St. John Bosco versus Modern Day. First mention of C.J. Williams listed Alabama, Ohio State, and USC as leaders in his recruitment thoughts. I think that is how do I say this? I don't think that article was written to be and this is not an insult, so that's why I'm trying to be careful how I say this about SI. I don't think that article's focus was on CJ Williams and making sure that you're accurately reporting his recruitment. What I know is those 3 schools are absolutely in the mix, Alabama and Ohio State more so than USC. But Notre Dame right now is in as good a position as anybody, if not a better position as anybody, with CJ. But as I've said a million times, the visits are going to be the end all. I mean, those are going to be determined who they're going to end up getting. And but I wouldn't put too much into that, in my opinion. Jordan Schreiber says, Friday mailbag, something I look forward to every week. Me too. And I'm excited today because we got the obviously, Sean, I love you, but I've been working on this dang merch store for a while. Yeah. So I'm excited about that.
That's huge.
But then also you and I have been talking about a month. We've been trying to figure out a schedule for like a month trying to get you on the show. So we'll get you on the show today. I'm very excited about that. Jay says, how do you guys feel about the newly offered wide receiver from the state of Alabama, Amari Kelly? So I'm going to actually pull up some film on Amari Kelly now so we can watch it together. I like Amari Kelly. I think he's a good football player. I think, being from Alabama, I don't know if I would not call him a gap closer. And Sean, you'll get a chance to see some of his film now. I would not call him a gap closer, but I think he's a good football player. And I think about Amari Kelly exactly what I think about the other one, which is I don't think they're offering Amari Kelly because they think they're going to necessarily lose guys. I think they're just trying to expand the board and make sure that they have good players on the board. Yeah. So let's just watch a little bit of film here of Amari Kelly. Again, you're going to see good size. He's about 6'1". He's a good athlete. Let's take this down so we can see it all. Good athlete, good route runner, catches the ball well. I just don't see a real explosive athlete. And That's my thing. I think he tracks the ball well. I think he's a good football player. He has a Bama offer. He has an Auburn offer. I don't know if those schools are necessarily pushing for him because I don't believe he has visits scheduled to either one of them right now. But I think this is a good football player. I think he's an outside guy that can do some things in the slot. That's a much better takeoff there than the last route we saw from him. Has decent downfield speed. He's a good athlete. There's just a lot of good things about him. And if this is a guy they end up getting, you say, okay, that's a good football player. Does it close the gap? No, but it makes sure that you don't fall further behind. I just think right there, you just don't see great separation speed from him, in my opinion. And unlike C.J. Williams, who I also don't think has great separation speed, C.J. is 6'2", 195, and can bully people. Omar's not that kind of guy. I love receivers that play defense. I love that hit right there. That was actually him sticking somebody. So, he's got a thin frame. He's going to have to work on that. But that right there, like just that little head nod, that's a good route for a junior in high school. I mean, that tells me that kid has an understanding of how to play football. So I think Amari's a good football player. I don't think he's an upgrade over some of the other guys on the board, but this is an example of the staff hopefully being proactive and making sure that if we do miss on this guy, because what you want to happen is, look, misses are going to happen, right, Sean?
Yeah.
But you got to make sure that if you miss on this guy, that the guy you get is kind of here, as opposed to what happens a lot of Notre Dame is you miss on this guy, you didn't have anybody else on your board, so you got to take this guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think this is the kind of kid, and that's a nice play right there. He's working open.
I like the rack. Yeah, I like the yak right there. Yeah.
Yeah. But he knows how to get open. He knows how to find soft spots. He's a real proficient route runner. He's just not a real dynamic athlete. At least I don't see that on film. But he is a junior. He's got plenty of time to continue to develop and getting faster. But I like kids that know how to play the game. That's one of the things I like about Nicholas Anderson. He's a tough son of a gun, boy.
He is.
You see it on defense and you see it there. And he plays with fire, too. And I love receivers that have swagger. Like, I just do. Like, there's times I'd get on my receivers for talking trash to opponents just because I'm, you kind of have to do that. But on the ball on the inside, I'm like, that was such a great line. Like, you know what I mean? I love that kid so much because I talked a lot of trash when I played too.
You know what? Sometimes you meet a kid, you watch the tape, and then you meet him or you talk to him. And you just feel something.
Yeah.
As a coach.
This kid's got a different attitude or something like that.
You just get an inkling like, man.
Got a swagger.
Yeah, if we get him into our system and we get him into our weight room, this guy might reach a ceiling that most people don't think he can.
Yeah.
So he's that type of kid. I watched his tape after I saw the article that you posted about him and CJ, I think Smith.
CJ Smith, yeah.
Yeah. And I watched a little bit of his film on last night. I was actually kind of impressed.
Mm-hmm. Good football player.
As a wide receiver, the first thing you want to see is, can he run after the catch, and can he pull away from people?
Mm-hmm.
Does he have top end speed? Only the elite of the elite really have that, right? That's like a rare trait. Most receivers, especially the defensive backs, always run the fastest at the combine, right?
Mm-hmm.
So normally they're going to be faster, but the advantage that the offense has is they always know where they're going. And if you can get to where you want to go,
and that's an example right there. That's an example right there, Sean. Watch him sink his hips on his top end, right? He's coming off that DB. He's going deep. He's going to beat me on a wheel, and then bam, sinks his hips. That's the breaks for a receiver. Your breaks are your hips, and he could even get a little bit more of a forward lean on his hips. But that's what you're talking about right there. Is do you know how to play football? At the end of the day, you know how to play football. And that's why I've always said Henry Ruggs is the most overrated receiver I've seen in a while because people obsessed over his speed. Well, he didn't do anything in the NFL as a rookie because the NFL, that 4.2 ain't going to do a darn thing for you if you don't know how to play the game.
Nothing.
And that's why you see so many guys run 4.6s and high 4.5s at the combine and pro days blow up in the NFL. Guys like Cooper Kupp, DeAndre Hopkins, Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas ran like a 4.57, but the dude knows how to play football.
Yeah, I'm happy.
At the end of the day,
Daz Newsom ran a 4.6.
This kid, to me, the thing I like about this kid, and you compare it to like a Nicholas Anderson, I'm seeing more of a burst than this kid. Than from this kid than Nicholas Anderson. Now Nicholas Anderson has a couple inches on him, but this kid can play. And I mean that right there, like that's a lot going on right there, and he just does it real efficiently. I like that route right there. This is again, this kid knows how to play football.
You want this kid in your wide receiver room.
Yeah,
you want a kid like this in your position room. He doesn't have to be the most talented, but he's going to bring a competitiveness into that room.
And this is my issue with Amorian Walker, because I feel like with Amorian Walker, they're taking his upside, but he doesn't he's not necessarily a natural receiver right now. There's just a lot more work that's needed from him. And so this to me, these are kind of kids, Nick Anderson, those are guys that I would have taken over Morian Walker, who does, I think, have a higher ceiling than those guys. But I always think there's a need in a class for a guy that just knows how to play. Nick Anderson falls into that category, but I think this kid's a little bit more athletic. And I think this kid's a little bit more versatile, Sean, because I can see this kid playing some slot stuff too, as opposed where Nick Anderson's just more of an outside guy. But, for me, once you took Morian Walker, it made it a lot harder to then justify taking a kid like this or a kid like Nicholas Anderson. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. A kid like that needs to be like your third best receiver in the class.
Yep.
That's my thing. All right. Let's see here. Let's get some more questions here. These are good ones so far. So let's work through some of these questions. We're at an hour and 40 minutes already. It does not feel like it's been that long. This has been a lot of shows. Here we go. Notre Dame 2164. Happy Friday, everyone. Do you guys think our defense is top 5, top 10, or lower maybe? Sean, what do you think?
We're talking about right at this moment?
Yeah, like projecting what we think it's going to be this season.
You know what? I'm going to hedge my bet on Marcus Freeman.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to say top 10.
Okay.
I don't know if I'll go top 5, but I'll go top 10. And it goes back to something that you've harped on continuously. Your playmakers, especially in the front seven, I think MTA, Marin Tagliafico, has been put in a better position to make plays. I think Jason Adriamola is going to make more plays. I think this system is going to empower that front seven to be a little bit more disruptive than we've previously seen. Same players, but a little bit more disruptive. That means more tackles for loss, possibly more sacks. And you say more sacks. Yeah, like more sacks. I really think you'll see more sacks up the middle. You might not have the speed guys that you had previously off the edge, but now you bring into play, okay, where's the pressure coming from? Is it coming from the rover position a little bit more? Is it coming from the inside guys a little bit more? There's so much more versatility in being able to pressure the pocket and disrupt the running game from Marcus Freeman's system. That's just the way I look at it, and just from listening to him and what he wants to do. Now, we all know what the big question is. It's going to be the secondary.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be the secondary.
And that's why I'm not willing to put it into that a little bit higher group right now.
Now, I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to trust that Cam Hart is that dude at 6'2", 180, 185 that we've been hearing about. And if Cam Hart can become that dude, Tariq Bracy can be anywhere near what
Just be what he was in 2019.
Yeah,
even if that's all we see.
That's it. And if you have to play him in the slot and let him be a dominant slot defensive back or a top-notch slot defensive back, that works for me as well.
Mm-hmm. Sean, I'm going to go top.
Your safeties, the safeties are going to be good.
I think so. Starters.
The safety starters are going to be
and I was getting ready to get into that, Sean.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm saying they're a top 10 to 12 defense, and partly because A, I think Marcus Freeman is a great coach.
Mm-hmm.
B, they return a lot of players, even at positions where they lost a starter. They're replacing that starter with guys who've played.
Yes,
you lose Dalen Hayes, who was a very underrated player at Notre Dame. Isaiah Foskey's played a lot of minutes. You lose Adi Ogundiji, but you're replacing him with a guy that's basically a two-year starter. Just at a different position.
Yeah.
You lose Sean Crawford, but Houston's played a bunch. So I mean, they're not playing guys who've never been on the field before at these positions. Jack Kaiser has played minutes. He's replacing Jeremiah Wusu-Kormoa. He's played legitimate minutes and has some big moments. So I think comfortably I can say top 10 to 12. Okay, is what I see.
Yeah.
For them to jump into the top 5, to me, 3 things need to happen. Number 1, the defensive line needs to be every bit as good as you and I think it can be.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2, they need Cam Hart to be that dude, like you just said. They need him to be that dude. And number 3, Houston Griffith has to be as good as you and I think he can be.
And I think
those are the three keys to me. Those and there's always good health and things like that. But generally speaking, those three things to me are going to be the difference between Notre Dame being 10-12 and just 10-12, which essentially is just you keep doing what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
And Notre Dame taking that jump. I think those are the three keys to me to that happening. Everything else can just be normal progression. Shane Simon doesn't need to play like Drew Tranquil this year. Drew White doesn't need to be Manti Te'o, right? We don't need all those kind of things. If everybody else just makes their normal Kurt Hinish case, keep doing what you're doing, right? Myron, keep doing what you're doing, all those kind of things. If those three things happen, I think that's what jumps them into that next level. So let's got a chat down here from Brandon. Thank you for the chat. Thank you for the super chat, Brandon, and for your support, man. I love that you're always in our show. And here's a question, Sean. This is a good one. What upgrade would you like to see to the Notre Dame facilities and stadium as well? What do you think Notre Dame could add that would help boost recruiting? Sean, do you have a thought on that? Because I actually don't. Me personally, I think they've done it all. I think they've done most of it.
Notre Dame Stadium at all.
Anymore. Yeah.
It is walking around that campus and coming upon that stadium is almost heavenly. And I know none of us have been to heaven quite yet. I hope all of us will get there one day. But, I mean, it is literally like seeing a perfect sunset over the Pacific Ocean. Yeah. It is like seeing a full moon on a clear night. It is beautiful. Yeah. It is college football.
And they've upgraded the things that they need, Sean. There's a recruiting area now in the stadium that's first class. The locker room now is as good as you're going to see. The things that Notre Dame is missing in the arms race is like they don't have a slide in the you know what I mean? Like they don't have a gym, like some of the silly things that teams like Georgia have or Clemson have. That's not why if a kid's not going to Notre Dame because they don't have a water slide, then he ain't come to Notre Dame anyway. And that's not a kid that you want.
No.
I think that you look at the indoor facility is as good as you're going to see. I think Notre Dame has spent almost $1 billion renovating and upgrading the facilities that have mostly been for football in the last decade.
Yeah.
I don't think they're behind in the arms race anymore. Yeah. And you hear that from recruits, right? So that's not just my opinion.
Yeah.
That's what we've heard from recruits the last 2-3 years, which is what you never heard about kids is, wow, the facilities were awesome. You never heard that till recently. Now you're hearing that. Oh, man, their facilities were great. I mean, I loved it. And so I honestly, Brandon, I mean, that's a great question, but I really think that Notre Dame has done a lot. The only thing that I would change, Sean, I would like to see a little bit more, and this is just my personal style, and there's going to be a lot of people who are going to disagree with me on this. I would like to see a little bit more flair on the field. I'd like to see, gold and blue in the end zone. And again, I know it's tradition, and I get all that, and I respect people that want to stick to that. But the lines, I'm okay if you got rid of that, right? I could live with that. Put Notre Dame in the end zone, like just things that make Notre Dame Stadium more aesthetically pleasing from a television standpoint. That's the only thing that I would add to it, and I don't mean Notre Dame Stadium. I mean the field. That's the only thing that I would maybe do a little bit different.
Yeah,
is that? But like the scoreboard is excellent. I mean, Notre Dame Stadium is it's much more of a happening, entertaining place now than it was 5 years ago.
Oh, the atmosphere comes across through TV like it is absolutely top notch. I can only imagine being a top recruit on the sideline or sitting in the stands because it's so electric when it comes to like the Georgia game, like the USC game, like when you're watching it, the Clemson game last year, when you had minimal fans.
Yep.
It was still electric.
But it still has kept the Notre Dame feel. You can still see, if you're sitting up in the top set, you can still see touchdown Jesus. You can still see the dome.
Yes.
And I don't think that the Jumbotron is taken away from the traditional nature of being inside the stadium. I just think that if you just put the Notre Dame and the Irish in the end zone. So Notre Dame on one side, Irish in the others with blue and then gold letters. That's the only thing that I would change about it.
I want one thing changed.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take away the away team entrance to the right, because I like the old days when we were fighting the tunnel on the way out. I need the trash talk and the fighting in the tunnel. Let's get it going.
When Alabama comes to town in 2028 or whatever it is, I'm with you. Like, hey, sorry, there's a leak. We have to close this entrance off. We need you guys to come out through the main tunnel. Yeah, I got you. There you go. I do miss that. See, we're dating ourselves to when you and I became Notre Dame fans. That's exactly what we saw. right, let's get to the next question. Here's a great question, Sean, and this is something that I think this is the perfect show for this because you do have relationships with former NFL players, as do I. Perfect ND Pint says, Brian, for those who are done playing and have to adjust to life after football, that can be very difficult. I feel we need to raise awareness for all those who may know former players' thoughts. And I think that there's two areas in our country that we are woefully missing the boat when it comes to mental illness. And there's mental illness problems across the country. But to me, and this is obviously a good timing for this too because it's Memorial Day, I think our veterans, especially those who have fought in wars, we're not doing enough to help them with the transition back to normal life. And as someone who, as a college player, went through an addiction to painkillers, and then when I couldn't get any more painkillers, was taking a leave like they were Skittles.
Yeah.
I was fortunate that I had a wake-up call that was like, and I had a support system at home. So what happened was I went to the dentist. I had to get some work done, and he stuck a needle in my mouth, and it just started bleeding. And he said my blood was so thin that he couldn't get it to stop bleeding. So he couldn't do the work. I had to go home.
Wow.
And from that was kind of like the awareness of like, look what I've done to my body. It's like I didn't feel like I could not be in pain if I wasn't taking that much medicine.
Yeah.
I was fortunate because I was actually still in college. So I was staying at my parents' house. I had a support system to help me get through that. And I also didn't get so far down the road with it that it became a true addiction, right? I was fortunate that dental thing happened before I got to that point.
Yeah.
But, as I've said, when you retire, your body isn't just healed. You've been taking drugs and you've been doing these things. And when I mean drugs, I'm talking about like painkillers and things like that. And that's part of it. But there's also this notion of the competitiveness that goes into being an athlete. And then you're done playing. And then you're like, where do I channel all this?
Yeah.
I was blessed in a lot of ways because I was able to get into coaching afterwards. But most players can't do that. And I think that especially for professional athletes who in a lot of ways aren't getting necessarily the support they need as players to handle their money and all these different types of things, and we're seeing the NFL Players Association starting to do more of this.
Yeah.
But I believe as a society, that type of thing with our athletes, and then even more so with our veterans, I don't think we're doing enough to say, because here's the final piece to it, Sean. In football, it is about as manly of an activity as you can do, and I mean that not just from a machismo, but more of a perception wise.
Yeah.
And one of the things, and you and I both know this, we both play football, to admit that you need help or to admit that you have a problem is considered, even today, is considered, man, like, no, I can't do it. I'm a dude. I'm a football player. I'm tough. I can handle this. I got this. And I think that is another thing where, because there's not the awareness and the sharing of, hey, man, look, I'm so-and-so, I'm in the Hall of Fame. I went through this. There's still a hesitancy to admit that we need help. There's still a stigma that comes with men, especially athletes, especially professional athletes, to admit, because people say, what are you complaining about? You made X millions of dollars. Well, I'm still battling depression. Yes. That has nothing to do with whether or not how much money I made. And so I do think that there needs to be more of an awareness and saying like, hey man, it's okay to say that you need help. It's all right to do that. As a husband, you can admit that you're not being the husband you need to be for your wife, or the father you're being for your kids. Right. That doesn't make you less of a man. It makes you more of a man that you're willing to say, hey, look, I got a problem. My family's not getting the most what they need from me because I'm dealing with this stuff. I need to get help for it. And I do think, Sean, that we need more of that in our country. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that, but I have a feeling I think you're going to agree with that.
I agree with you 1,000%. This topic has kind of hit me personally recently. One of the first people I was able to work with when I came to ESPN Chicago was doing the Bears pregame show with Steve McMichael. And he's been in the news lately, a member of the great 85 Bears team. And he's dealing with ALS, and his health decline is pretty rapid. And to, a big personality like that, guy that would always come in with a nice expletive on an early Sunday morning for you with a box of donuts. And you just a really great guy. And to see him go and suffer through that, and then, see his teammates come around, and you talked about the brotherhood you have, but, some of his brothers never knew like what he was dealing with and what he was going through, because as men sometimes, we get into what I call that toxic masculinity. Like we have masculinity, but some of it is very toxic and causes us to be isolationists and can isolate ourselves, and which is damaging, because there's no outlet for you to either release the depression or the stress or to get the answers that you need, because no one knows that there's a question there that needs to be answered. So, and how people can live amongst their family, and their family, I honestly will tell you this, your family knows, because somehow, some way they're being impacted by it, even if they don't know exactly what it is. And so we need to lend a helping hand. We need to be advocates along with them, because it's hard to advocate for yourself when you have your ego.
And you may not even know you have a problem. That's the other part of it. Some of these guys don't realize that they have the issue.
That as well. And, I have, like I said, I have friends and people that I work with in the industry that deal with something every day. Every day they wake up, they have to deal with something from playing the game of football. And yes, they leverage that against generational wealth and being able to take care of their families. Their kids probably are going to be okay financially if they're not here, but the loss that the kids would have to go through with them not being here is damaging and would never leave them forever. So, yeah, I think as a society, we definitely need to be more aware of what these players go through. And I think that yields to what needs to happen with what we previously talked about with this legislation and how we treat these college players. Like, have respect, even though they're in the early stages of what can happen, but have respect for what they're doing to their bodies.
And those are the things that makes me so upset. Like, people are talking about getting these kids money. That's the kind of stuff we should be focusing on first.
Yes.
Is helping these kids, because the NCAA is so unwilling to admit that athletes are not normal students. Even at Notre Dame, they're not normal students. There's nobody else on campus that has to go through what a football player has to go through. Nobody. And we have to be willing to accept that and admit that and say, look, that's where we should be putting some of our resources, is making sure. And that's something that Brian Kelly and Notre Dame have done with, I'm trying to remember her name. Oh, goodness gracious. But they have a lady that deals with that works with players on their mental health.
Yeah.
But like, I'd even give her more, Amber's something. I cannot believe I can't remember her name. But she does a lot of stuff with that. But it's not just about like, mental empowerment, but it's also about like making sure that these kids understand that, hey, life's going to be a little bit different. Amber Selking, that's who it is. But
Amber is worth her weight in gold and more.
Yeah.
To those young men.
Yeah. And like I said, I would even expand that. But every school should have that mandated for athletes, all athletes. And now I think that football by nature and other sports like hockey can have some of that, and lacrosse can have some of that, where it's more of a contact sport, right? I think that even more so that we need to be more aware of that and make sure that and some of these kids are going to be fine, right? Like, you know what? He's fine. He's well adjusted. He's going to be okay. Yeah. But making sure that we have a system in place so we can make sure that these kids that we know that aren't, because as you mentioned, some of these guys are going to have wealth because they play in the NFL, but most of these kids aren't going to go to the NFL. And a lot of the ones that are making league minimum. And look, league minimum, if you play in a league for 10 years and you make league minimum, you're doing okay. But if you get cut after a year or two,
a
lot of that money is already going to be spent, because that's another issue, is we're not dealing with these, making sure that we're teaching these kids to handle money and things like that. That's a subject for a whole nother show. But anyway, I appreciate you sharing your thoughts on that one, Sean. And to Perfect ND Pint, I really appreciate you asking that question. We have a lot of fun on this show, and I love talking football, but it's okay for us sometimes to say, hey, look, there's more to the game than just the game.
Yeah. And
there's more to the people that we love to watch and follow than just what they can do athletically. And we need to make sure that we're caring enough about them in those other ways too, as a country. And that's why I say that's a big thing for me when it comes to our military is the number of homeless veterans we have, because we haven't done right by them when they come back from war, fighting wars that we don't have to, because we don't have to, is another to me, just a tragedy that needs to be corrected by the wealthiest nation in the world. Let's get back to football, Sean. Can we get back to football transition? Tony Stengel says in 2020 is 2022 the year we should be very excited about. 2020 the class of 2020 will be juniors and leading the charge. O-line will have a full year of experience. Year 2 of Freeman, year 3 of Reese, talent and depth everywhere. That's not to say I'm not excited about 2021. Just seems like there will be less question marks in 2022. Sean, you would go ahead and answer that one first.
Excited about what's the excitement about Notre Dame being a top 5 team?
The contender. I think national title contenders a lot of people are looking at.
No, Notre Dame's a contender to get into the playoff every year at this point. We just reload with talent. We have the coaching. Now it's time to do it. It's like, from a recruiting standpoint, go get the game changers. Yep. And I want to say this, and I think this is the next step. In my opinion, I'm not speaking for Brian or the publication or anything else, anyone else. In my opinion, I need the Notre Dame program to step up its mentality and its expectations at the top of the program. I'll just leave it like that, at the top of the program. I don't want to hear anymore if we play within ourselves, we can do X, Y, Z. No, I need to hear we're the best football team on this field each and every day.
And play with that swagger.
Play with that swagger and infuse that into the program. So it permeates to everybody and it permeates to the recruits when they come on campus. That's what I need. That is the next step for me to feel as an ND fan. I need to feel that, and I don't want to say, get away from a mid-major mentality. Like if we do everything right, then we have a chance to win.
Stop acting like you're in a business. Start acting like you're a college football coach again.
Yes.
Play with that energy, that fire. Notre Dame should never be out hustled, should out hit, out talked, out swaggered. Should never.
Never.
You may get out athleted.
Yes.
But, we're going to make you pay for beating us, and
that's why you have to get rid of that other entrance. Just get back to the tunnel. Just get back to the tunnel. We need some fights.
Well, as you know, nowadays fights aren't looked at as positively as they used to. I mean, I grew up in an era, you did too, where Larry Bird and Dr. J got each other by the throat and throwing punches. And if that happened nowadays, people would be talking about banning the NBA and all this other nonsense. So don't even get me started on that. But
we saw some bad things happen in this Knicks Atlanta Hawks series. But the one thing that's happening on the court is great, entertaining basketball. And that's what you need in this program. You need that swag. Do we even have, right now, if I ask you or ask fans out there, who is the most hated rival right now that you just hate? Because nothing's really happened. The
answer would be either USC or Michigan, but that would be more about what's happened in the past and more about hating the fan bases than it is that Miami. Because this is the thing, you and I grew up when Miami and Notre Dame hated each other.
Yes,
and not just fan bases, the players,
the coaches
hated each other. There was no respect between Miami and Notre Dame. Now there was talent respect. But you even watch the Catholics versus convicts and you watch the U and all that kind of stuff when they talked about Notre Dame. Yeah. There is a disdain for everything Notre Dame stands for.
Yeah.
And for Notre Dame, you listen to Chris Zorich talk. There is a disdain for everything that Miami stands for.
Yes.
And you don't see that kind of heated rivalry anymore. But that comes from being a passionate, just that fire in your belly, like we're going to go out there and do that. And, Alabama can get away with not having that. I don't think Notre Dame can, to your point. And I'll answer the question this way, Sean. I think that number one, I think this is a sneaky year for Notre Dame to be a national title contender. And here's why I say that. I think the defense should be outstanding. You've got Kyle Hamilton. You will not have Kyle Hamilton in 2022. There's no Clemson and Ohio State on the schedule in 2021. There is Clemson and Ohio State on the schedule in 2022.
Yep.
I also think this is a year where Alabama took a big personnel hit. Now, they're still going to be really good. They're still going to be a title contender, right? But they're not going to be what they were last year. Clemson losing Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne they're going to still be good. They're still a title contender, but they're not what they were in 2018. I don't even think they're going to be what they were last year. Ohio State, is breaking in a redshirt freshman quarterback, or he may get beat out by a true freshman quarterback, right? They lost some personnel. Now, again, they have a lot of talent coming back, but they lost a lot of players from their team last year. Oklahoma's got a lot coming back, right? But to me, Oklahoma's not a team that Notre Dame should be necessarily saying, "Oh, we can't beat them," right?
I mean, a lot of people are picking Iowa State in that division.
Yeah. So to me, this is the year. This is actually a year where I do think Notre Dame can be competitive for a championship because everybody else is kind of coming down. Now in 2022, Alabama's going to have all those guys coming back. Ohio State's going to have all those guys. I mean, so the places where they're young now. So Notre Dame is in a similar situation to a lot of teams that lost talent.
Yeah.
I mean, Notre Dame lost 9 players of the draft, while Ohio State and Alabama both lost 10. I mean, Alabama lost 6 in the first round. There's going to be a drop-off. Now, drop-off means nobody could touch us to where we're still the best team in the country, but we're beatable. That's what I'm talking about. So I actually think this is a year where if Brian Kelly does what he needs to do, and if Tommy Rees makes the changes that I'm hoping he's willing to make, and Jeff Quinn is hopefully better than I think he is as an offensive line coach, and Marcus Freeman is what we think he is, I think this team should have a chance to go compete with people.
Yeah.
They got talent. They're going to have a loaded backfield. You're not going to have Kyron Williams in 2022, most likely. You've got Mayer, you've got Williams, you've got Tyree, you've got Jack Cohn at quarterback, you've got a deep group of receivers. You're going to lose a lot of those guys after this year, most likely. So I'm actually excited about this team. And am I predicting them to be in the playoff? I'm not there yet. Am I predicting them to win a title? I'm not there yet. But I think this team, when you look around the country, this team, if some things can go right and if they can make some good decisions, I'm excited about this team.
Yeah.
I'm not even at 2022 yet because, again, part of that is there's no Clemson, Ohio State on the regular season schedule for this year's team. And if this season doesn't go the way that it needs to go, then they're not going to be the team that we think they're going to be in 2022. So I get where Tony's coming from because you look at, man, there's going to be a lot of dudes coming back in 2022, and the O-line's going to have 4 or 5 starters coming back and all that other kind of stuff. But I want to see what this team can do. Liam Gaming says, what is the number on offensive production yards, run and pass, that put you in the Heisman talk, 2,300? I'm assuming he means running back. I think from a running back, I think you need at Notre Dame. I think you need 2,000 plus total yards of offense, and you need Notre Dame to be a top 5 team. That's the other thing. Notre Dame needs to be really, really good. I think for a quarterback, you've got to be around 4,000 yards at a place like Notre Dame of total offense, and then win some big games to be in the Heisman conversation. I mean, look, Ian Book finished like 7th or 8th last year, and his production was mediocre.
Yeah.
So Notre Dame does kind of come with some built-in advantages of you don't necessarily have to put up the same production that Joe Burrow put up to win a Heisman Trophy. You just got to win a bunch of games. Yeah. And you've got to put up a higher than normal season. So if Jack Cohn goes out there and throws for 3,700, well, put it like this. If Jack Cohn puts up the kind of numbers that Brady Quinn put up in 05 and 06, and Notre Dame is fighting for the playoff berth, he's going to be in the Heisman conversation. If Notre Dame is in the Heisman, is in the playoff hunt in November, and Kyron Williams is pushing for about 2,000 yards of total offense, then he'll be in a Heisman conversation. So I think those are sort of the benchmarks for me, Sean.
Numbers and moments, right?
Mm-hmm.
Numbers and moments. That's what it's all about when it comes to the Heisman. Do you have that moment, and do you have the numbers? I go back to, let's say, Tim Brown, right? The brand definitely helped him in his Heisman candidacy, but he had like a 3-week stretch where he had kick return, punt return that were like moments on the national stage. That was just like Instagram. Before Instagram was like, you know what? Here's your social media right here. National televised game. Go make it happen. Be the best player on the field. Because if you look at his wide receiver numbers, I mean, they were a running offense. He really didn't have big numbers as a wide receiver. But, you know, what he did after the catch, when he caught the ball, and then the plays he made on special teams, and the fact that Notre Dame was once again ascending and the brand was coming to life again, all of that played a major role in him winning the Heisman. And I think Manti finishing was second when he did. Yeah. Was the same thing. The brand, you know, once again, Brian Kelly bringing the brand to a fever pitch, and then you get Manti just leading a top-notch defense and leading them to an undefeated season.
And the moments.
And the moments.
It was the diving pick against Oklahoma. It was the goal line stand against Stanford. I mean, those are, you know, that's the thing with Rocket too, is like Rocket, if you actually look at Rocket's numbers, they weren't like insane numbers.
No.
but he was so good at everything. But it was, again, he had some of those big moments, and he still got screwed out of the Heisman Trophy, in my opinion, in 1990. He still should have won the Heisman Trophy.
I'm talking about big moments like in the fourth quarter of games, like clutch moments.
Yeah.
He was, that's what it takes.
I mean, you think about the 90 Miami game. You know, Miami's making it a game, and Rocket takes that kickback. You know? So, you know, I mean, and what people don't remember now, especially younger people, is Miami won the title in 87, 89, and 91. That's a 5-year stretch they won a title. Do you know what happened in the 2 years they didn't win it? They got beat by Notre Dame. 88, 90. I mean, so that's what I say. Like, that was Miami. That was Clemson and Alabama back in the day. Yeah. And then Rocket had some of those, had that big moment against that 90 Miami team. So, it's numbers and moments. I think it's a great way of putting it, Sean.
The 89 game down in Miami, where Notre Dame, I think, had won 16 straight. It was 10-10 at halftime. You know, and Miami just made the plays in the second half.
Was that third and Lou Smojian always talk about this, that they had like a 3rd and 34 conversion, that was the game. Like when that happened. But you know what? The other thing that Lou used to talk about, he said a big reason why Notre Dame didn't come to play in that game is because Lou was so worried about the perception of the fight from the year before that he kind of took away some of that energy from that team. And I think that's what kind of
keep the same energy.
Exactly. And that's something I think is missing from this team, is that swagger of, we're the baddest dudes on the block. We don't care who you are.
Yes.
We don't care what you did last year. We're Notre Dame.
Yes.
You don't have to go through what we go through. You don't have to go to class every day. You don't have to do this. That makes you harder when you have the right mentality. Instead of using them excuses, Lou would use those things as, hey, you think anyone else is going to class for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day doing the work and then coming in here and having to deal with me at practice? Heck no. But that's what's going to make you tougher. That's going to make you stronger. Now, all those things, I think, is part of the mental stuff that the coaches need to be doing.
Yeah.
All right. IUP Jess says, how much of Kyron Williams' jump in athleticism you talked about, this is what we talked about in the running back show, is because of Bayless, and how excited should we be if he adds more athleticism to the already impressive traits of the two freshmen the same way? To short answer, a lot of that is Bayless's program. And then obviously Kyron brought in. I think Kyron's always athletic, but I think he was more explosive last year because he just changed his body. He went from a kind of a pudgy looking freshman kid to a pretty ripped up sophomore.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to see the same jump in athleticism, Sean. I think now the key for Kyron is becoming a more efficient football player.
That's the word I was going to speak. I was going to use the word efficient.
I had to get some of the credit here, so I had to take that from you. You know,
hey, you have the best hand on this show, without a doubt. So I agree, and I think the efficiency will also come from you'll see his average yards per rush go up. I think that's the emergence of Chris Tyree and how he's used. And then I think his use in the passing game is going to make his overall impact on his offense much better. Absolutely much better. So, look for him to have a better season, a better impact on games.
Yep.
That's the word I'll use, a better impact on football games.
All right. Bert Ferenc says, hi, Coach. I'm a Bishop Gorman alum. Is there anyone else that's on Notre Dame's radar there other than Cyrus Moss and the OT target? That would be Jake Taylor. They're both 2022 kids. The only other kid that I know of right now that's on their radar is Zachariah Branch, who's a 2023 kid. I would imagine Notre Dame's going to continue recruiting that school. They will always recruit that school. I think now it's about getting some of those guys. I mean, obviously they got Ronnie Stanley, got Nico Fertitta, they got Alizé Jones. He became Mac, but he was Alizé Jones at the time. So I'd like to see Notre Dame have some more success there. I would love it if they could double up with Cyrus Moss and Jake Taylor. That would be phenomenal. But you need to get at least one of them, in my opinion, because that's a program. It's not quite what it was when Coach Sanchez was there, before he left for UNLV, but it's still a really good program that you want to get kids from.
Fantastic facilities.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And Bert Ferenc says, and love the show and all the content. Keep up the great work. Well, we are going to definitely keep up the content. So, I mean, we're at the end of May and we're still putting out a show every day. So, I mean, we're not taking time off. We'll take Monday off, but it's Memorial Day and I'm going to go see my family. And I'm going to go see my 89-year-old grandma who just got out of the hospital. So she beat COVID. So she's back home now, 89-year-old lady. So she's a tough lady. So I'm going to go spend some time with her this weekend. All righty. John Climax says, I'm traveling to the Badlands for a family vacation, but he's got the Mailbag streaming, loving it. Thank you, my man. Really appreciate that. All righty. Domer Grizz jumps in for another question. He's a first-time commenter today, Sean, so we answered his question for the first time. If a team gets stopped on 4th and goal at the 1-inch line, where is the ball placed when the other team takes over? Flip the ball around, and it's an automatic safety. Well, if it's at the 1-inch line, it's not a safety yet. It's still in the field of play. They would flip it around, and it would be at the 1-inch line, because if you flip the ball around, the ball's still in the same spot. It's just – it just spins. So, yeah, they'd be pinned at the 1-inch line, at their own 1-inch line. Now, you got nowhere else to go. You know what I mean? But, yeah, you're going to be at the 1-inch line.
What's your call when you come
My call?
What's your first play call? You going
Depends on my personnel.
You going to play action post?
Depends on my personnel. No, you know what? If I'm getting cover one, I've always been that's why I love the call that they made in 19 against Northwestern. You remember that call they made in that game where Northwestern went cover one, and they just said, we're going to throw a fade to Chase Claypool.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you have that kind of personnel in this team. I would probably get out of the pocket, try to get out of the pocket, and do like a little sprint out, and just try to give myself some room. Because my concern is you have a quarterback in Jack Cohn who I love, but Jack Cohn he's more sackable than a guy like Ian Book was. Gotcha. I don't necessarily want to run it right now because I got a young offensive line, and I'm worried about this being the play where you have that one mental mistake where somebody gives up a run through.
Yeah,
I would probably, with the makeup of this team, try to do something on the perimeter where maybe you line up a couple tights and bring Braden Lindsey in motion or Lawrence Keys in motion, and then do like a little sprint out where I just try to isolate him on a little slide route, maybe run like an in or a curl behind it in case they overplay it. I can just maybe hit a little 10-yard completion. That's probably something I would do, just give myself a little bit of room. And then Jack's going to have that internal clock on a sprint out where you get outside, you either run it or you throw it away. And that's probably what I would do on that first call, getting out of there. All right, John Climax says, watch some Cincinnati games. Marcus threw linebackers on the field as ends on some 3rd and long plays. Was that because he didn't have the ends needed at Cincinnati, and will he do that at Notre Dame? So I know you're talking about that was Ethan Truckee. That was just kind of his role. That's the kind of player he was. I think we'll see Jordan Botelho do some of that stuff. Yeah. It's not that they didn't have the ends, but the way that Cincinnati ran their 3-3-5 is their two down linemen. 2 of their down linemen were big guys. They had their nose, and then they had their other end was 6'4", 275, 6'4", 280 guys. So they had to make a personnel adjustment to get that second edge rusher on the field with Sanders, who is a monster defensive end. So that was just more about the makeup of their roster. So they'd bring in Ethan Truckee, but Ethan Truckee was listed as a defensive end. He looked like a linebacker, but he was listed as a defensive end. Sometimes they'd bring Beavers up as an edge, kind of off the edge too. But Notre Dame's going to be in a different look because Notre Dame's going to have more of a true 2-end alignment more often. With Foskey and with Jordan Botelho. So that's why I think that was, again, an example of, Sean, and we've talked about this before, Marcus Freeman is going to build around his personnel. Yep. He's going to have the same philosophy, same principles, but the personnel is going to look different because he's going to take his best players and utilize his strengths as a program.
I think what we'll see from Marcus Freeman is that Marcus Freeman, I'm trying not to be disrespectful when I say this. I'm really trying to be respectful of the Cincinnati program. I think Marcus Freeman walked in and saw the toys he had on defense at Notre Dame and said to himself, oh, my God. If you thought I was being tricky at Cincinnati, wait until they get a load of me. Is that Jack Nicholson as a Joker?
That was the original Batman for y'all young bucks.
Yes, right.
That was the original, the original Batman movie, I should say.
And I think goes back to the question of whether or not this defense would be a top 10 defense. I think Marcus Freeman is looking at the chops and saying, "Wait till they get a load of us."
And he hasn't been able to coach Kyle Hamilton yet.
No,
that's nothing.
No, no. But it's like if you watch
Kyle Hamilton took 0 reps in practice.
You have a guy that totally made the number 1 team and national champion say, you know what? Scrap that part of our game plan. We're not about to challenge that guy anymore. Leave him alone. Well, we might end up turning the ball over. We can just simply throw these swing passes and just out-athlete and get by that way. We're not going to try anything deep, even if it's single high. We're not going to try and look them off and play action them. Just stay away from him. When you have that type of impact player on defense, that's a toy he hasn't had.
No.
He hasn't had that toy. So he's waiting to open that.
Yeah. That's going to be fun to watch. Kenny Moore says, Notre Dame fans love to say we can't consistently go toe-to-toe Bama and Clemson in recruiting. Watch how quickly that changes with Freeman. Abso-freaking-lutely. Absolutely. Agree with Kenny completely. Robert says, and Sean, we've talked. That's one of the things you hit on when you first started talking about Marcus Freeman in the head coaching part. Is this is a guy that's not? You got Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson offers. Okay, well, not only am I not afraid of you, you're exactly the kind of kid I want.
Right.
Robert says, guys, in your opinion, what is the worst loss for Notre Dame football in the last 4 years of resurgence? I would say Michigan, totally unacceptable. We kind of talked about this in a recent show, Sean. So my opinion was made on this. It's Miami 2017 because I think more was on the line, and that was to me that was Notre Dame's best talent team of this 4-year stretch. Was that 2017 Notre Dame team? That was the team that I thought had the talent to go toe-to-toe with anybody that year because the talent nationally was also down. Clemson wasn't that great that year. Alabama wasn't great that year. I think that team could have beat anybody if they were playing their game. In your opinion, what was the worst loss the last 4 years?
The worst loss the last 4 years. We've talked about this, right? The Miami game, I can see that. But for me, I go back to this. I think that Stanford game, was that the same year? They went out to Stanford and got into that offensive back and forth. Because they still had a chance, even if they didn't make the playoffs, they still had a chance at a New Year's Day bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And Stanford really wasn't that good that year. I mean, they were still, I think you saw the residue of peak Stanford maybe. But there's no way you walk into that game and you can't get 1 to 2 stops at the end of the game. And I was disappointed. I was already disappointed with the defensive showing against Miami. But the defensive showing against that Stanford team was just, they pretty much threw up jump balls all night on the outside and won just about every jump ball. We shut the running game down because I believe McCaffrey had a twisted ankle.
Yes.
He was on a bum ankle that game.
Yeah.
And we held them in control. We held them at bay. But we just gave up way too many third and longs. That's the one thing that stood out about that game. We would get Stanford into third and long, and we consistently allowed them to convert. It was one of the most frustrating losses I probably endured as a fan. So, maybe if Miami is 1A, for me, that Stanford loss would be 1B.
And it was just indicative of the same reasons. That team had no business losing that game.
At all.
Yeah, I agree. So, Sean, I'm going to ask this question here. I think it's a great question. I'm actually trying to find some photos because I have a strong opinion on this.
Okay.
Because my answer is going to, but I want you to answer this. So, D-Rock, who's one of our regulars, one of our loyal listeners, says, gentlemen, your preference, the 1993 Notre Dame uniforms or the current uniforms? Also, I love the current helmets. Gold is greater than chrome. So you give your opinion on this, Sean. 93 uniforms or the current uniforms?
Oh, that's tough. That 93 team has a special place in my heart, man. Special place in my heart.
I'm gonna pull it up and show everybody the 93 uniforms.
Despite the loss to Boston College, that team.
That's the 93 uniforms.
Yeah, I know. Look at my guy, Kevin McDougal. Look at my guy, McDougal. That was my quarterback that year. I think he's when they got in the red zone, was that Fela?
Yeah.
That was the red zone quarterback?
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice 1-2 punch there. I'll go. Can you pull that back up again?
Yep.
If I'm not mistaken. Yes. It's the gold right there around the tip of the arm for me that made that stand out.
Yeah. So I'm going to show you what uniforms I think that Notre Dame should be using. Okay. And I'm trying to find a picture here because my answer is which ones I want, the 93 ones or the current ones. My answer is no.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm trying to find this photo that my wife took real quick because that's one of the years she was doing photography. And you're going to see, and I think you're going to see what I'm talking about here, Sean. So let me find this picture of Alohi Gilman that she took that I really want to show. And it's here it is. Okay. So this, to me, if this was Notre Dame's uniform, I would be absolutely ecstatic. That right there. Because you get rid of those ugly mustard pants. You go back to the gold pants that they had back in the day, but you got a more modern jersey.
Yes.
And the gold and the new shiny. I love the Notre Dame's helmets now. But you put those helmets, so not the bronze helmets, borderline bronze helmets from 1993.
Right.
But those helmets with those pants, to me, that is hands down the best Notre Dame uniform I've ever seen. And here's the thing. It looked great on TV and it looked great in person. But it's a pretty good shot there.
You know what I need, though? I'm about to date myself again. I see, keep this picture up. If a Lowy probably had about 3 inches taken off that jersey and had his navel showing.
It's Chris Zorich from 1990.
Yes.
From 1990.
100%. Perfect, right?
100%. Or if he had like a giant neck roll with the orange.
Yes.
That we also saw those from there. But to me, though, that's the best uniform Notre Dame has had.
I agree.
In my opinion. I mean, that is a gorgeous uniform.
Look. Yeah, I like it.
And again, the pants actually match the helmet in that instance. All righty, let's get through some more of these. We got to wrap up here, Sean. I appreciate you've been with us so long. David Knight says the glitter gold helmets are awesome. He liked the white with green stripes under the lights against Michigan uniforms. That would be from 2011. Or no, 2011. I liked those uniforms as a change-up with the green. Remember that? Those look sharp. Tommy Leonard says, I'm probably in the minority, but I like the split blue gold shamrock helmets. That'd be from the Miami game in 2012. Right? I did not like those at all. I didn't like those. You are definitely in the minority. A lot of people like the 2013 Arizona State all white, like alternate uniforms. I didn't like those as much. I'll say this, the 2015 all green against BC looks sweet in person. They were terrible on TV and terrible at the stadium because you couldn't. There was all green. You couldn't tell numbers.
Yeah,
but like in person, they look sweet. Like when we saw them, like when we were in the press conference, they introduced them. Those look sweet. Can y'all rank your favorite Shamrock Series uniforms? Oh boy, I mean, like I said, I think the green ones look the best.
The green ones are the best
in person. They just didn't look good on TV.
The Arizona.
The all white with the gold. I mean, I thought those looked good. I haven't necessarily loved a lot of the Shamrock uniforms, if I'm being honest.
When they played Purdue in the Shamrock, what did they wear?
They had the gold helmets that looked like the kickballs, the little, and then they had the blue Shamrock, I believe, on those. Okay. I believe that's what they were. And then they had the all blue. I think they also had the all blue uniforms because I remember Everett had there's some really cool photos of Everett Golson that year from that game. But I think those were the ones where they had the all. Yeah, here we go. So this is what those look like, Sean. I'm gonna try to save this one here real quick.
I don't know why that game stuck out of my mind, but
those ones I thought looked pretty sharp.
Yeah.
So let me pull those up here real quick. We're getting all types of different topics today. So let me see if I can pull that one up. But those I thought looked really good. Where's my? Here we go. Let's see if it pulls up. Nope. There we go. Okay, here we go. This is going to work. So let's get rid of that and pull this up. Trying to do all these different things at once, Sean. It can be challenging sometimes. This is the 2014 Notre Dame Purdue uniforms. I thought these were pretty sharp. These were pretty nice.
Yes.
Those were nice.
Yes.
Those were nice. Yeah. And I like changing the helmet on Shamrock games too. I know some people don't, but I do. But I always want it to be gold. That's my thing.
See, I'm cool with that being an alternate.
Yes, agree.
I'm cool.
Agree. I'm one of the few. I actually like the pinstripes from the Yankee Stadium game because of where they were. Yeah. And I know a lot of people didn't like those, but I thought those were sharp. All right. Richard Robinson says, you made a great point about Alabama DBs. Watch playoff game again. DBs held on almost every play. It works. Why don't Irish try it? MSU does it too because Notre Dame would get called for it. That's why.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Sean Higgins says, is this BK's most important year of his Notre Dame tenure with recruiting on the cusp of closing the gap? A setback on the field could be devastating. I think that's a great point, Sean. I don't think Notre Dame can afford a step back this year. I don't. I think they have to be at least 11-2. And I think part of that 11-2 needs to include a bowl game win over a big team. I think they have to keep – I don't think they have to make the playoff to keep this thing rolling. But I think they need at least a 12-1, 11-2 type of season where they look really good doing it, put up big numbers and all that kind of stuff.
What's the allowable composition of that 11-2 for you?
To me, it has to either be 11-2 where you lose a barn burner at the end in a bowl game to Alabama or something like that, Ohio State, where this is from a recruiting standpoint, where you go toe to toe. Let's say Ohio State doesn't make the playoff and you don't make the playoff and you play in a bowl game and they beat you by a field goal, or Bama doesn't make the playoff and they beat you by a field goal, where you've shown, hey, look, we've closed the gap, that kind of 11-2, or a 10-2 where maybe they stub their toe, during the season once or twice, a guy goes down, something like that. And then they go out and play Florida in a Sugar Bowl or play Oklahoma in the Fiesta Bowl and smack them. Like, it's got to look something like that for me. But I still think 2 losses is going to be tough because I don't see 2 losses out there, at least 2 acceptable losses. But I think that's why the big bowl win would be the thing, because as you and I both know, how you end the season is going to have a lot to say about the momentum you carry, and especially when you can beat a team. Like, I saw somebody all excited because they got some bowl projection. They play Coastal Carolina in a major bowl, and they would no. That's not. No one's going to care about that.
No.
You're supposed to beat Coastal Carolina.
Yeah,
so, that's my thoughts.
This goes back to the point I made about raising the bar, the expectations at the top of the program.
Mm-hmm.
I'm about quality. Like, I need to see Notre Dame dragging the teams they're supposed to drag.
Mm-hmm.
Like, from the opening kickoff. Like, I need special teams. I need punt returns. I need kick returns. I need reverses. I need, fly routes. I need just spectacular plays all over the field on both sides of the ball to establish, like, this program is ascending once again to even that next level.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're on your heels, Clemson. We're on your heels, Alabama. We're right there.
Yeah.
Like, this gap isn't as big as you thought it was. It's not sweet anymore.
That's what made 2017 so impressive.
Yeah. So even if it's 11 games, if the composition of those 11 games is like a close
2019.
Yeah.
That was the ugliest 2000. That was the ugliest 11-2 team I've ever seen. That only win was over Navy. Beat an Iowa State team that nobody cares about in a bowl game. It can't be that.
No.
It can't be that.
No. I need more than that.
Yeah, that keeps you right here while those other teams are pulling away. It does, but it doesn't close the gap. I think you have an 11-2 season where maybe you have a bad upset loss in the regular season, but then you go smack Florida or smack Georgia or smack Oklahoma in a bowl game. That moves the needle. But to your point, that's what made 17 so unique, because they didn't just win games that year; they destroyed people that year. Yeah. And that's what I want to get back to. I want to see Notre Dame not just beating Purdue, not just beating Cincinnati, not just beating Wisconsin, but smacking them. Smacking them. That's what I want to see. All right, yeah, and that's what Jack Cohn will have his "How do you like me now" moment. No question about it. There's a couple comments here. Tommy Leonard says, "This ain't your older brother's Notre Dame anymore, where after the first 22, the talent is non-existent." Agree completely. That's what people are missing. That's what the national media is missing. Jay says, "I love it when the media sleeps on Notre Dame." It kind of annoys me because it just seems like it just seems like laziness. That's what bothers me. But as a coach, I'd love it if they slept on me.
Yeah.
Tommy Leonard says Notre Dame no longer retreats; they reload, and absolutely. Dan Squatch says, "What would y'all put the point spread between Notre Dame and OU?" I'm going to assume he's talking about Oklahoma. To me, I think it just depends on where the game's being played. If it's at Notre Dame, I'd probably make it a couple point spread. If it's at Oklahoma, I'd probably put Oklahoma by a couple points. I mean, I think they're very similar teams. Oklahoma's ranked a little bit higher. But if Notre Dame's a legitimate top 10 team, which they are, they should be favored at home. That's how I would put it. But I'm also not a point spread professional in my opinion.
And
what do you think, Sean?
If it was at the beginning of the season, like you said, venue matters, and then when the game is being played.
Mm-hmm.
anytime after week 6, I would have Notre Dame favored in that game. Anytime before that, I would give Oklahoma a much better chance. I mean, Oklahoma would have a chance to win regardless. But
sure. Oklahoma's going to be a very good team this year.
Yeah.
They got a lot coming back, and they finished the season off pretty well.
I'm only saying that because, of course, what we don't know. We don't know who Cam Hart is going to be. We don't know who Tariq Bracy's going to be.
And to your point, you'd have them against an Oklahoma team that returns a lot of talent early in the year. Would make it a little tough. I'd still say if it was at Notre Dame, just because, again, Notre Dame doesn't lose at home. I'd still make Notre Dame a very close favorite at home.
Right.
I should maybe say, like, if it is early, maybe you put Oklahoma up by 6 or 7 if it's at Oklahoma. So the spread would be bigger at OU than it would be at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
But I'd still make Notre Dame the favorite at home. Let's see here. And just somebody asked me something about Oregon or Oklahoma. This is a great response. There ain't but one OU I could mean. I love it. And he's absolutely right. 100% right. I'm sorry. With all due respect to Oregon, there ain't but one OU. It ain't Ohio.
Right.
Okay? Absolutely. Okay, he kind of adds to it, Sean. He says, in a hypothetical world where Notre Dame meets Oklahoma in the playoffs this year, if it's in the playoffs, then I'm taking Notre Dame. Because if Notre Dame's in the playoff, it's because everything that you and I have said needs to happen has happened. And the thing there is Oklahoma would certainly have a better offense, but Notre Dame would have a much better defense. And I think Oklahoma's defense is getting better under Alex Grinch. This isn't the defense from 4 or 5 years ago. It's not. It's better. But I still think Notre Dame's offense would match up better against Oklahoma's defense than the Oklahoma defense would match up against Notre Dame, because Notre Dame's not in the playoff if the defense isn't elite, in my opinion.
Facts.
So, yeah.
Totally
but I think it'd be a great game. I think that would be a great, great game. But I like Notre Dame's front 7 against
a little bit better.
Yeah, against that offense from. And I think Oklahoma has very good pass game weapons, but I don't think they have like a Hollywood Brown. I don't think they have a CD. And I love Marvin Mims. Like, don't get me. I love Marvin Mims. They got some up and coming young receivers.
Yeah.
Who's the kid that they got? Is it Blaylock? No, Blaylock went to Georgia. I forget that one of those kids that had similar names went to Oklahoma. They got some good young receivers. Don't get me wrong. But again, if Notre Dame's in the playoff, it's because their defense is playing an elite level, and I think that'd be a great matchup. I'd make Notre Dame to me the favorite in that game. Or they probably wouldn't be the favorite because the media would ignore the fact that Oklahoma's never won a playoff game either, and got killed by LSU way worse than Notre Dame's ever lost a game.
Yeah,
and they would only focus on the fact that Notre Dame's never won one of those big games. You know how that's how it would go, right? And it would drive Notre Dame fans absolutely freaking nuts.
Not to mention that the Big 12 as a conference really isn't good. Yeah.
What happened the last time Oklahoma made the playoff? Was it like 62-28, right? And it wasn't that close.
Yeah, against Alabama.
It was against LSU in 2019. They played Joe Burrow and LSU because Alabama's year before.
They got blown out.
Yeah,
because they got Kyler Murray got blown out.
They lost by 11, but it wasn't that close.
Right. Exactly.
But the LSU legitimately could have hung an 80 spot on Oklahoma.
I agree.
In 2019. Yeah. Like they had 49 at halftime.
Yeah.
I mean, and there was nothing Oklahoma could do. I'll tell you what though, I gained a lot of respect for Jalen Hurts and CeeDee Lamb in that game because even when they were getting killed, they were playing hard.
Yeah.
They were playing hard. It's just their defense was
awful
garbage. And that was probably the greatest offense I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I think the only offense that I've ever seen that could hang with that up until the title game was the Oklahoma offense back in, what was it, 08?
08.
But then, I lost a little bit of respect for that offense because Florida kind of shut them down in the title game.
Yeah.
Do you remember that Sam Bradford, a quarterback, that 2,000-yard running backs that year, Chris Brown and DeMarco Murray? That team was really good. All right, let's see some more questions here. Tommy Leonard says, until Notre Dame wins what the rest of the country would consider a big game on the big stage, don't see them getting much betting love. I agree with that. I think that's fair. Domer Gris says, I just wish point spreads were based on what the actual score would be rather than on influencing human betting behavior. But then that'd be kind of
against the purpose.
Right. And it took me a while because I didn't follow betting until I got older and started doing this job. And I was like, these don't make any sense. Like, what? They actually think that, and then somebody, no, that's not what they're doing. They're doing it because they're trying to get equal betting on both sides, and that's the big thing. All righty. Let's do some more here. All righty. Dan Squatch says, I'm just and Dan's been in the show before. He asked a really good question. I think, Dan, you were the one that asked about Florida State a couple weeks ago. I'm just a Florida State fan, curious of where Notre Dame fans view the CFB landscape. Like, the further y'all look past us, the better. I'm trying to get a feel for it. I mean, look past you. I mean, it's the only game right now. No one's looking past it. It's just Florida State's not very good. Do I think Mike Norvell could have them going? Sure. I like Mike Norvell as a coach, but let's not act like you haven't earned the right to be looked past by Notre Dame fans.
Trust me, no one is looking past Florida State.
No one at Notre Dame is looking past Notre Dame. No one a part of the football program is looking past Florida State. But fans are rightfully looking past Florida State because, number one, the last 2 times they played, Notre Dame smacked Florida State. The best Florida State team that Notre Dame faced in recent years, Notre Dame should have beat. That was not offensive pass interference.
No, not at all.
But Dan Squatch is good. He comes into the chats. He asks real questions, and he's good. I like him. But there's a reason fans are overlooking Florida
And I would
State.
ask you, what game would we be looking forward to look by you?
That big Toledo game, baby.
Right. Like, come on.
No one's looking past it. No one just thinks that Florida State's going to win that game.
No. He's looking for a reason to have hope.
Yeah, and I get that. And I think there
cool.
should be reason to have hope because, number one, I like Mackenzie Milton. I hope he's back and healthy, and I like Mike Norvell as a coach.
Yeah.
It's just that's not the game that hope is going to be restored in.
No.
It's just not. I think if Florida State could catch Notre Dame in a time where there's not a bye or there's not a whole fall camp to get ready for it later in the year, maybe, but it ain't happening in the open.
Not game 1, no.
Yeah. Okay. Dan Squash says, I dropped in on this channel a while back due to my due diligence scouting in the offseason, and as a FSU fan, having gone through what we've went through the last years, it sounds familiar. Yeah. Well, Notre Dame's been there, man. Trust me. Just go back and look at the Bob Davie, Ty Willingham years, and we feel your pain, my man. We feel your pain. But I do think Mike Norvell, and we're starting to see Florida State have a little bit of success on the recruiting trail in the last couple months too.
Yeah,
and that's been the big because Willie Taggart was just that was a disaster of a hire. He set that program back 5 years. It was so bad. All righty. Let's see if we get some more of these. AJ says, I love Gus Johnson. Perfect big game voice. Can we all agree Chris Fowler has a terrible big game voice? I agree. I don't know about you, Sean. Are you even allowed to comment on that because of what? Okay, you can't comment on that. I don't work for ESPN. I'll say it.
I'll take the 5th on that
one. Yeah, just look at the name. So let's take this down. So just look at that right there, Sean's name. All right. So Sean has no opinion on Chris Fowler. He loves Chris Fowler.
No.
I don't have to love Chris Fowler.
Yes, absolutely love Chris. The whole crew.
I miss Brett Musburger or whatever his name is.
I even love Desmond Howard, by the way.
We're gonna have to kick you off the channel.
I want to see your response to that one.
Because my feeling on Desmond Howard. Oh, we lost Sean's connection. I don't know what happened. I'm going to finish the rest of the show by myself.
Oh, wow.
I like Chris and Kirk together. Gus is good as well. Dan Squatch in here is somebody who was once at the top of the mountain and then had the rug pulled out from under. I'm just saying you never far from the bottom. Don't forget. We get the lesson. Trust me, Notre Dame fans understand very well that lesson. A lot of love for Gus Johnson. Gus is the best. I miss Keith Jackson. Oh, Nelly. Yeah, Keith was a great voice. He was a great voice. Keith Jackson hated Notre Dame. Yes, he did. Do you remember the 88 game when he kept harping on Tony Rice stepped out of bounds and he was this far from the end zone because the
USC game?
Yeah, there was that cup. There was the maroon and then there was green. Or there was open and then but he kept thinking that was the back line.
Yes.
And for the next 5 plays, Keith is just losing his mind about he stepped on the line. I'm like, no, he didn't.
Anytime Keith Jackson had to call a Notre Dame game during that era, just listen. Don't even watch the game. Just go to his final call.
Yeah.
As the coaches are meeting in the middle of the field. And it was he was just disappointed.
Because they always lost. USC did not beat Lou until 96, 97?
Yes.
Something like that? Yeah. Okay, Stephen B. Last bit of a random question. Last bowl season seemed to have a crazy amount of kids sitting out. Do you think that will continue or was COVID a factor? COVID was a factor, but it will continue.
It will continue. Yeah.
And that's why I think we should adopt my plan for the postseason because I think that would mean less of the big game kids will be sitting out. And we could talk about that another time too. All right, Domer Grizz, we're going to try to fly through these last questions because I know Sean's got to go, and he's been nice enough to stay with us this whole time, but I know you got to get rolling. And I am starving. Domer Grizz says, question if there's time. I heard that Group of 5 B-ball teams are avoiding scheduling Power 5 teams so that the Power 5 coaches can't get a live evaluation for poaching G5 transfers, thoughts, football relevant. I mean, I think that's probably like one or coaches. Some coaches are going to feel that way, sure. But the reality is they're just going to watch the tape. They're going to call coaches that play against those kids, and they're going to poach those kids anyway. Yeah. I mean, Notre Dame didn't play against Paul Atkinson and Yale, right? I mean, they watched the film. You can see his feet. Now, of course, then you could watch him against North Carolina when he played against them, but they're going to still poach. I mean, that's just a fact. They're still going to poach. Yeah. You know, just schedule them, and here's the deal. It is what it is. It's a crappy system. Those schools have been screwed over. You develop kids, and then the big schools can just take them. It is what it is. Here's what you do. You develop the heck out of those kids, and that's going to help you to continue to recruit better because these kids know that, hey, I didn't get the Big 5 offers, but if I go play for Coach so-and-so, he's always having kids after a couple of years go to such and such. And then you just start treating that like, you know, teams, the Power 5 teams treat guys to go to the NBA. So, Sean, you got to bounce?
Yeah.
Can you say what it says as we wrap up these last few?
I want to thank you for having me. Mm-hmm. I agree with you. The poaching is going to continue. Mm-hmm. And so
get your money. Me. Get your money. That's it. Get the money and then go keep recruiting better players. And it's what it is, man.
Hey, man, everyone continue to watch Irish Breakdown. I watch it each and every day. It's the best content to get connected to Notre Dame football, basketball, all of the sports. And even though baseball had a tough day today, I still like what his program is going on.
Coach Jarrett's done a great job.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I hope I did a good enough job for all the followers to.
You did, Sean. You did a great job. And that endorsement is why he's getting a free hat.
Don't forget, follow, give a thumbs up, and continue to support.
Sean, you want to quickly throw out your email or your Twitter handle if you want to, so people can kind of know where they can find you and the work you do?
Absolutely. Whether it's Twitter or whether it's Instagram, you can follow me at SD2Mics, SD2Mics.
The number 2.
Number 2. Yes, SD the number 2 and MICS.
Right there. You can see it right there in his name. So we cover that up. That's it right there.
Yep.
All right. Sean, appreciate it. We're going to have to do this again, my man. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your thoughts with us, and we'll have you back again here soon.
Man, look forward to it.
Sounds good.
Have a great holiday weekend, guys.
Take care.
Yep.
All right, so we're going to wrap up here, try to get to these last questions. This has been a lot of fun show. I appreciate everybody being a part of this show today. Let's get to these last questions here. Okay. I got to find some questions here. Thanks, Coach. Got to get into those LA schools, gold mine of talent. I agree. A lot of talent out in California. Notre Dame is recruiting California a lot harder this year than they have in the past two. Okay. D-Rock's talking about the poaching thing. I heard that too. I heard these indirect conversations take place in the court after the games. I think will impact football too. But it's going to happen regardless, whether you play them or not. Okay. This is a question on Facebook. I'm not sure. Let me see if I can pull this up and see who this question is from so I can have an idea of who I'm speaking to here. All right. This question is from Rob. All right. So Rob asked the question is where do you think the Irish will finish this year? What bowl game? You know, for me, Rob, I'm still not there yet where I'm going to have a strong opinion on for sure what they're going to do this year. I still want to see some things happen. I'm still doing some research on some other schools, but I think right now, as I said in the past, the floor is 10-2. The floor is absolutely 10-2. And that's the 11-2 really. They should do no worse than that. I can live with 11-2. I'll have some criticisms for it, but you know, to me, there just aren't any. There's nobody else on the roster that has better talent top to bottom, and as long as they don't have better coaching, then I think Notre Dame should still be able to roll along. All right, let's see here. I'm gonna get the last couple questions. Okay, because we got to get going because I'm getting pretty hungry here, but there's still so many good questions. How important is Chris Ayers? How important is it for Foskey to have a huge season in making up for some deficiencies in the secondary by starting to get to the quarterback consistently along with keeping him fresh by substituting? Agree completely. It's not just Foskey. To your last point of it, Chris, it's Foskey and Patelho. I think both of them need to be very effective getting after quarterback, but then they're going to need that pass rush up the middle too, and that's where Jason Adamiola comes into the conversation. So I think the pass rush is going to be very important, and I wouldn't necessarily say if deficiencies in the secondary as much as its inexperience. I think there's some talent there, but I don't care if you have a great secondary. You have to have, in today's era, you have to get after the quarterback. And I think Foskey's a unique player compared to Patojo because Foskey can also impact it by not even getting to the quarterback because he's so long. Even if he's coming off the edge and you're trying to throw around him or behind him, he's a hard guy to throw around because he's so long and he's got just really long arms. He's 6'5". He's got a really big radius and wingspan, which can hurt as well. Let's see here. Good conversation. I love the conversations. See, David agrees with Sean. The fights in the tunnel were awesome. Rob Wicks asked a question about Nick Anderson, and we talked a little bit about him earlier. I think Nick has really good size. I think Nick is a smooth athlete. I think Nick is a really polished route runner. My issue, however, is I don't think he's a dynamic prospect because I don't think he has dynamic athleticism, and I don't see there being a jump in athleticism when he gets to the next level. He is a Corey Robinson kind of guy. If I had to pick a Notre Dame comparison, he's that kind of player, which, again, is a good player, but you're not closing the gap on Alabama and Ohio State and Clemson with a Corey Robinson type of player, in my opinion. Brandon says, Brian, do you take notes during Notre Dame games, or is it your post-game analysis breakdown solely from memory? It's a little bit of both. So especially when Notre Dame's on defense against teams that are going tempo, Brandon, I can't possibly write out all the notes. What I've kind of done is I've sort of got a shorthand things that I do that kind of jog my memory. So I'll make like a little quick note or a check. So I'll put check cover, 5 check cover. And then I'll remember, okay, 1st and 10 at this happened. Oh yeah, I remember that play now. And so I make little notes after every play, but they're not like full, okay, Cameron Hart did a great job with his pedal. I have check technique or minus technique. And then if I have time at the end of the series, I'll go back and just write some overall thoughts of some takeaways so that way they're fresh in my mind. So, but the notes are meant to then jog my memory to what happened specifically during that time. And that's where my post-game analysis comes from. And it's a lot like when I was a coach. I mean, when you're a coach, you can't write a bunch of notes out, right? You have to watch the play. You have to have your thoughts on. You have to be able to recall that. And then when we go in at halftime, I got my little notes of hey, we need to make sure we think of this. And oh yeah, on that 1 2nd and 5, they were doing this. And so we need to make sure that we have a counter to that or something like that. And so, but those things are part notes, but then also part you have to remember and be able to recall what exactly happened. And your notes are meant to jog that. Okay, 2nd and 5, I'd write on the card, hey, 2nd and short, weak roll. And okay, that's right. Hey, look, almost every time we were 2nd and short, they were rolling that weak side safety. Let's attack that. Let's maybe look off and bang a backside post route, or maybe we can run a play action and run like a high low or something like that. There's things that you could do, and that's kind of where I learned it from this year. Caleb Collins also asked about the projected record this year. I'm not ready to do that just yet. I'll do that as we get closer to the season. But as I said before, 10-2 is the floor. My prediction will probably be a little bit better than that. Okay. Jack Foot says, I feel like the weight room could use a new design or maybe some different music choices from the band Stadium Music, and agree with the end zone revamp. But on that, it all looks top notch. I agree. I agree with you. I mean, I think the weight room maybe could use a little bit more, but I think it looks good when you're inside it. It has a little different feel inside. But yeah, I mean, I could see that. And I think the players should be the ones picking the music. All right, Old Grim, such great insight on life, more than just football, makes this a great show. I appreciate that, Old Grim. I never know how topics like that are going to be taken by people. Some people just want to talk sports, and I try to keep politics out of this stuff, and I don't want to talk politics. But to me, this is still talking about football, and it's about issues to me that, I remember I was watching the 88 game, right? It was 89 Penn State Notre Dame last night. I couldn't sleep last night. So I pulled up YouTube and I just popped in the 89 Notre Dame Penn State game. And, they announced the starting lineup and Jeff Alm's the starter. And then I remember, I believe Jeff Alm committed suicide. And there's been other players that we've seen that from. You think of the battles that Lewis Nix has had, that ultimately led to him losing his life and things like that, to where Dave Duerson. Some Notre Dame greats have battled with this stuff, and it's not so as easy to just say, CTE. It's not just CTE. There's a lot more that goes into it, and I appreciate you being willing to hear that. And there's some other people that commented on it and allowing us to maybe to address a question, but to talk about more than just X's and O's and recruiting. So I really appreciate. I'm glad that you like that, and being willing to appreciate that. Okay. D-Rock, bring your lunchbox, full day at work. Paraphrase, though, I think Lou Holtz. Yeah, I mean, that's what you want Notre Dame to be. You want Notre Dame needs to get back to, and they're getting close to this, where you may beat us, but you're going to limp away from this fight. And that's how I felt those 88 to 93 teams were. Like, you may beat us, but you're going to remember that win, because we're going to make you pay for it. We're going to hit you as hard as we can and do everything we can. All right. Liam Gaming, Tim Brown's returns were against Michigan State. He had two returns in that game, I believe, right? I could be wrong on that. Who's RB Lorenzo White was a Heisman candidate. But it's the big moments, especially Notre Dame. I think the big moments in Notre Dame are even more important than the big numbers. And I think, the big play that I don't think Ian Book played that great against Clemson, but he made huge plays at the end when it mattered, right? So it didn't matter what he did the first 3.5 quarters. He had a couple plays here and there, but the fact is in that Clemson game, he made huge plays that led to that victory. And if it wasn't for that, and he had the same numbers but didn't have that moment, then no one's talking about Ian Book being a Heisman candidate. Jack Foot says, what kind of alternative jersey designs would you like to see if Notre Dame decides to bust them out this year? I always like the dark green and gold helmet, and I'm not a fan of the Kelly green, gold, and blue. I like I do like the Kelly green. I do like that brighter green. And that's partly my memory of them putting that on that was it the 91 Sugar Bowl, 91 Sugar Bowl, I believe. 92 Sugar Bowl after the 91 season. Or no, was it 90? Yeah, 91. Yeah, because they played Texas A&M the next year. I think I could be wrong on that. I always get the A&M and the Florida Bowl game years mixed up. All right. Here we go. Rocket definitely got robbed. Also, that punt return against Colorado that was called back was the worst call in college football history. Agree with both of you. With all due respect to Ty Detmer, he should not have won the Heisman Trophy that year. Rocket absolutely should have won a Heisman Trophy. I still have never seen a more dominant, dynamic college football player. And I've often asked myself, what would he do in today's era with the spacing that exists in today's era? And the game I was watching last night against Penn State, and Lou Emoji used to talk about this. He said, back in the 89-90 season, Ricky Waters is running the first 3.5 quarters, and then they bring Rocket in the fourth quarter. And it's just like that speed. And when you're tired, oh, goodness gracious. All right, Liam Gaming, kickoff return production gets everyone riled up. You can't even have two guys next to each other to block. Can you describe a few schemes? Let's do that on a different show, not one where we're 3 hours in. Let's do it. We'll do a special team show this summer, and we'll talk about. I'll try to find some film of some things to show that. David Knight says, Brian and Sean, how can you get that Chris Zort's nasty demeanor back on the field without accruing a great deal of personal fouls? It's not about the personal fouls. It's just about the energy and the passion. And that's something that has to be instilled in the program every single day. And you have to allow for your players to have some, it's okay for them to talk a little trash, as long as it's not being a distraction of what they're doing. It's just about an overall get out of that business-like mentality that Brian Kelly covets so much and allow them to be 18 to 21-year-old kids having fun playing a game that's all about passion. And that's what I would like to see. Jeffrey Rohrbacher, I'm going to show Sean this comment. Sean is great. I hope he comes back for more shows in the future. We have been, I'm serious when I say this, I've been trying for over a month to get Sean on the show. Sean would have me on his shows during the season. I've known Sean for several years. He's a great guy, loves Notre Dame, very smart, as y'all saw. But he is a producer at ESPN in Chicago, and so it's hard to time it up right. This worked out perfect because Vince was off, and then Sean had the day off. But we're going to definitely try to get Sean back, and maybe for some shorter segments. Obviously, this one went a lot long, but I'm glad y'all got a chance to spend some time with Sean today. He's a really good guy. Like I said, loves Notre Dame. Old Grim says, with Kelly more involved, will Reese will the recruiting improve on offense? I hope so. It's too early to tell. All right, Benjamin Perry, nothing worse than getting spanked by Michigan without throwing a punch. I agree. All right. Dropping Dime says, what is the most infuriating loss that you have seen as a Notre Dame fan? In my whole life, it's the 93 Boston College game. Because Notre Dame would have had a second national. They would have beat Nebraska that year. There's not a doubt in my mind they'd have beat Nebraska that year. If Notre Dame would have beat Boston College, Lou Holtz would have had 2 national titles. Take that to my grave. D-Rock says, I'll take that uniform too. Yeah, you're talking about the Lohi Gilman one. Yeah, I would love for that to be their normal uniforms. Dropping Dimes, is Notre Dame having a Shamrock Series uniform against Wisconsin? I don't think so. Number one, the Shamrock Series is always a Notre Dame home game. This is not a Notre Dame home game, so I don't think they're going to have a Shamrock Series uniform, and I don't know if this is going to be any kind of special event for Notre Dame from that standpoint. I think it's a neutral site game. Doesn't mean I wouldn't like to see them have something special, but maybe come out with some green or something. But this isn't that. This isn't a Shamrock Series game, so I would be surprised if they had a different uniform for this one. See, if you're gonna hate the Yankees, I get it. I hate everything Yankees, so I don't like the pinstripe. I get it. I just thought they looked sharp. I mean, but you're in Yankee Stadium, and if you're a baseball fan, you can hate the Yankees and still appreciate and respect the fact that it's Yankee Stadium. All right, I liked the pinstripes. I agree. That jersey and pants with the modern helmet, pick of Alohi. I love it. Right, it's a great look. I absolutely love that look. I wish that was Notre Dame's every game look. That'd be so amazing. I think Under Armour needs to get on that. When recruiting a DB, can you even say the word nickel? Is that perceived as an insult to the 4-star player? Not as much anymore. I think that you don't call it a nickel anymore, though. You don't say, hey, you're the nickel. You talk about other things he can do, but then that's part of your package. I also think the thing that you got to do is you got to educate kids on where the NFL is going. Like, look, you get the NFL 60-some% of the time, they're in a substitution package. They're in some kind of different package than their base defense. And the more teams can put 3 corners on the field, the better. And so I think it's just about the right way of selling it. It's like when teams first started going to 3 receivers and you had to find that slot receiver. You have to convince them like, hey, you're still every bit as important. All righty. Where do you think we would be if we still had Chuck Long? I don't know who that is. Let's see who this is. I'm going to pull up the Facebook page and see who left this comment about the 90 clipping thing, because that is Rob left this one as well. I still remember the Rocket clip against Colorado. That was an awful call. I believe they would have won the national championship if that call wasn't made. So they wouldn't have won the national championship. That was the 1990 season, correct? I believe Notre Dame had that 1990 season. That was Rocket's last game. Georgia Tech was undefeated that year. They were 11-0-1. Colorado finished the year 11-1-1. They ended up tying for the national championship. It was co-national champions. One won it with like AP, and the other one the coaches polled. Notre Dame that year was 9-2 going into that game. That win would have, and they were ranked 5th. That win would have obviously jumped them up, but you had Miami that year, who Notre Dame finished 3rd. Notre Dame would have finished ahead of them. Florida State finished 4th. I think Notre Dame would have finished ahead of them. And Georgia Tech and Colorado were 1-2. I think Notre Dame would have passed Colorado up to number 2, but I don't think they would have been co-champions because Georgia Tech was undefeated and Notre Dame had a bad loss in the regular season. They had 2 home losses. One was to a good Penn State team that finished 11th, right? But you still lost at home. But they lost to a Stanford team at home that finished 5-6 that year. And I don't think you can make a claim for a championship when you have that going on. All right. Dan Squatch says, thanks for getting to my lowly FSU question. I come here respectfully. I appreciate the way y'all go about winning football games. Hey, Dan, you're always welcome back. This is a Notre Dame channel, but you're going to get treated with respect here. We like talking ball. As long as you come here with respect, we're going to treat you with respect. And the last couple times you've been in our channel, you've absolutely done that. So, look, you want to come in and ask about Florida State, go for it. We're going to have a Florida State preview this summer. So be there for that. And we're going to try to be as fair and objective as possible. I'm a former coach. I like talking ball. So you're not going to get hammered here unless you're like that Arkansas fan that came in the channel the other day running his mouth. I'm like, you went 3-7 this year and you're being an idiot. So you have not done that, which is why we answer your questions and why you get treated with respect, I believe, in this channel. Because most Notre Dame fans are that way. The idiots on Twitter that act like jackholes, that does not represent the majority of Notre Dame fans. Notre Dame, and you come to a Notre Dame game, you're going to get treated with respect. There are going to be people inviting you to your tailgates. That's just how Notre Dame fans are. The vast majority of Notre Dame fans are good people that love college football, and so that's why you're going to get treated that way. All righty. Let's get to some last couple questions here. Which uniform provider do you prefer, Notre Dame, Under Armour, at Notre Dame, Under Armour, or Adidas? I hate Adidas, so I'm all about Under Armour. I like what Under Armour's done. I like their gear. I just want to get rid of the pants, but I just change the color of the pants, make it back to the way that it was before. Okay, so you were talking about Chip Long. Where would they be if they still had Chip Long? I mean, look, I don't know. I think they would have recruited better, but, look, Coach Long moved on. I think he did an excellent job at Notre Dame. I think he played a big role in the foundation that was established that allowed them to make the playoff last year. We can talk about where they would be, but he's not here anymore. And Coach Reese is the offensive coordinator, and I know for a fact that Chip Long has a lot of respect for Tommy Reese as a coach and the future that he brings to the table. So, and I think that that there's still a relationship there. So, look, where would they be? I can't tell you that. I don't know. I think things will look different than last year. Would they have been better on offense? Sure. Would that have impacted them being able to beat Clemson in the rematch or in Alabama? No, because the issues go much deeper than Tommy Reese, in my opinion. All righty. D-Rock, hit the like button. Always appreciate it when you guys can hit the like button on our shows. Subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. Absolutely, D-Rock. We appreciate you reminding everybody. Absolutely. So Liam Gaming, thank you. I'll be traveling. It's only about 2.5 hours. I'll be heading back to Lima, Ohio this weekend to spend time with my family this weekend. And my parents and my sister and her kids are coming into town, so it'll be a lot of fun. All right, Domer Grizz, thanks for all the taking all my questions. Glad Sean could fill in for Vince today. Safe travels this weekend. Appreciate it. Same to all of you. If any of you are traveling for Memorial Day weekend, please be safe. Please be smart, but enjoy your family and remember what this weekend is all about. And that's why I thought that question came at the right time, because it's not just football players that I think we need to be doing a better job with. Jack Foot says, I agree that Kelly Green looked good in the Sugar Bowl game against Florida, but didn't like the Kelly Green on FSU senior night more recently. Yeah, that was a weird color combination. I thought that just the whole way they went about putting that color, it's like the jersey wasn't built around the rest of the uniform. I didn't like that. I'm with you. I didn't like that color. It has to be used appropriately. I like color. I like the Kelly Green as sort of like a number, or if you're going to make the whole thing Kelly Green. And that's why I like the 2015 uniform so much. The problem is because they made the numbers also a similar color, you couldn't see the numbers on TV and you couldn't see the numbers in the press box. But I thought up personally, they looked really, really good. Let's see here. Okay. And that looks like it is going to be it. Dynasty ISP, hey, man, great show today. Go eat lunch, man. Don't let that blood sugar get low. Trust me, I'm good in that regards. My wife got me some tea beforehand. I had a nice breakfast I had a nice little kind of late breakfast right before the show, but I appreciate you looking out for me. So that is going to be it for today. A reminder, we will not have a show on Monday. I'm going to be with my family on Memorial Day. I hope that a lot of you are going to be with your families on Memorial Day. We may record a podcast this weekend, but it wouldn't be a live one. It would be one that we would throw up on Memorial Day, but most likely we won't. I need to be able to get out of town, spend some time with my family. I'm not going to do a show that day because I don't want to do one on the road. I just want to be able to spend some time with my family. And I know that y'all respect that and appreciate that, and get a chance to go see my parents, who I don't get to see very much because they live in Virginia. I live in Indiana. Get to see my nieces and nephew, who I don't get to see that often, and my sister and brother-in-law, who also live in Virginia. And then, of course, all my family in Ohio. So I'm going to take that day off, but we'll be back at it on Tuesday, right back ready to rock and roll. We'll have tons of content. Hey, I'm not taking a break from writing articles at irishbreakdown.com. So make sure you're still locked into that. Make sure you hit the like button before you bail, and make sure you subscribe to our channel. And of course, don't forget, the merch store is launched. I put a link in there earlier to it. It's store.irishbreakdown.com. I'm going to put another link in here now. So if you want to get some of our hats, if you like our shirts, all those kind of things, I just put the link in the chat. I'm going to attach it to this podcast. So if you're watching this not live, it will be in there later. But appreciate everybody being with us. Have wonderful weekends. Stay locked into irishbreakdown.com, the website. check out our merch store. Perfect time. It's right before Memorial Day. Perfect time to buy some gear. You have 3 different kind of hats. We got some Gap Closer shirts, a Gap Closer hoodie, some Irish Breakdown gear, long sleeve shirt, polo, visors, mug, all types of good stuff. And then as we get closer to the winter, you can buy your Irish Breakdown beanie. So check all those out. Appreciate everybody being with me today. Everyone have an awesome weekend, and we'll talk to you all again very, very soon.